Let's begin with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Cool. Do we have any emergency additions or modifications of the agenda?
We have none.
Approval of the agenda.
I'll move to approve. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Everybody, thank you all for coming. As you know, this is a meeting for us to take information about Summit Elementary School. There will be no action tonight, meaning that there won't be any vote or any disposition of the issues that we're going to be discussing, but we're obviously going to be taking as much information from as many different perspectives as we can get. Normally at the beginning of our meetings, we allow people to speak, and I know we have a bunch of people that have indicated they want to speak, but with your, I ask your patience because before we take your comments, we would like to gather some information from the administration. If anyone really feels like they just can't wait and they have to have something that they were needing to do and they want to just speak and leave, I would allow that, but we certainly would prefer to do it after the presentation of information from the district. You guys good with that? Great. So let's begin with the presentation.
Okay, so I'm going to just lay a bit of a foundation as to the reason that we're here tonight. I see a lot of familiar faces, so I personally met with Summit families on May 10th with our principal, Marilyn Smith. Cheryl Knox was at a follow-up meeting with PTO on, I believe it was around the 15th. So I know a lot of you already know this information, but for the board's sake, this is the first time that they're able to hear this information and participate in the conversation. So for their sake, as well as anyone else who wasn't at those meetings, we're going to try to quickly go through some of the reasons of why we're engaging in this conversation tonight. So first of all, obviously the most important issue when we look at Summit and what it may look like for next year or about its future, I wanted to detail in my memo that hopefully you guys have and that we have extra copies in the back, but the enrollment future and the enrollment past for the district. So that's on the first page of the memo. This is what we talked about when we met with the families earlier this month. You guys, again, I know that I see a lot of faces of current parents of Summit kiddos or of recent parents or guardians of Summit kiddos, so you guys know these numbers as well as anyone. Summit in 13-14 was last year that we were over 50, we're at 62, and then really since then we've hovered in that high 30s, low 40s range. And it only came to our attention, actually, we first fully saw the picture in this way on May 2nd, I think it was. We realized, of course, we knew that we were having a large outgoing 6th grade class for this current cohort is 11 students currently, and they started the year at 13. So we knew that was going to impact Summit's enrollment, but it's actually been a combination of a very small kindergarten cohort. You guys can see that information listed here, as well as a number of either movements out of the district or to other schools mid-year, obviously some directly as a result of the fire, some actually predate the fire, but we did see a number of changes through the year, and actually as recently, a question of why didn't we talk about this sooner, I went back and was looking at our information as of March 23rd. At that time, we were absolutely projecting Summit to be over 30 students. We had, again, we knew the 6th grade cohort, but from the remaining enrollment, we were looking at something in that kind of low to mid 30s, anticipating a kindergarten class in that kind of 5 range of what we've been seeing. And so it's only been in the past 2 months that we've seen more students either leave mid-year or potentially look at not returning for next year, as well as a very small kindergarten cohort. So I think that's obviously the foundational reason of why we're looking at this is that Summit were to exist in its current form next year, it certainly is going to be looking differently because of the enrollment. And that was really what prompted the conversation with parents, is to make sure that we transparently informed you of this information and what the impact it would have on staffing and finances. So we will, again, I'm not going to be reading from this, but just to help you see where we're flowing from in the document, I did mention briefly in this on page 2 about the impact on funding. So I think everyone familiar with Summit and Upper Ojai knows about the necessary small school funding. That was a funding allowance that we qualified for beginning 3 years ago. This coming year, we actually fall out of qualifying for necessary small school based on this enrollment reality. The crucial figure that we no longer qualify for is necessary small schools requires that you have 15 students who live a certain geographic distance from the next closest school. Right now, we're looking at only 6 students that remain enrolled for next year who meet that geographic parameter. So we're 9 students away from that. Additionally, necessary small schools gives you funding by a grouped student system, or it's a tranche system, where you receive the same amount of funding for every 24.5 ADA. So that means that even if we met the geographic parameter, because of our overall enrollment, we would fall under the funding that would allow 2 teachers, and so we'd only be funded for 1. So it's actually 2 factors in necessary small schools that we fall out of because of our anticipated enrollment. So what we moved into when we were talking with families earlier this month was what that impact will really have for students, and the way in which that will impact the educational environment we're going to have Cheryl talk about in a moment. But I do want to mention what's listed here, which is a few staffing changes that will result or would have resulted, would potentially result from these changes. So first of all, our special education instructional assistant is currently a 6-hour-a-day employee. That position is directly tied to what services are required on IEPs, on individual education programs. The needs of the school next year based on enrollment would reduce that position down to 2 hours. So that would be 4 hours of support, of adult support coming out of the classroom. We also are looking at a kindergarten or a 6th grade cohort in that 4, 5, 6 range, and so as that more closely mirrors what we were looking at 3 or 2 school years ago, what we're looking to need to do is actually bus those students down to Summit to give them their math program down there with Miss Spiva, our 6th grade teacher down there. So the 6th graders will be leaving Summit in the morning, returning around snack time, but that we would have that as an additional impact. So this year, because we had, again, 13 6th graders start the school year, we actually did hire an hourly certificate support person so the students could remain there and receive their instruction from that teacher. But with as few students as we're looking at, and the loss of the special funding for the school, we are looking at a program where those students can better be served, not just from a staffing standpoint, but again, when you really talk about what 6th grade math, Common Core math is looking for, and again, Cheryl will touch on this, of why this is not simply a reduction because of funding, but it's because it's what we believe to be best for the students is having them receive their math services at San Antonio.
What time of day does that happen?
That's the beginning of the day, so they would be
like 7:40 or 8. I mean, right? There's 2 different start times. San Antonio is different than Summit.
San Antonio begins at 7:40, so it would be the first part of their instructional day. Marilyn, do you know the exact time? It's
we start at 8.
Correct, right? But
I'm not sure. Probably about 8 it would start.
Okay. I don't know how we.
Yeah, because Sherry's not here,
I'll
right?
have to clarify.
To figure out how that worked in previous years.
Yeah.
When they were going down the hill earlier than, or they would show up at the normal time and then be bused.
No, I know they weren't showing up at the regular time and then being bused.
Oh.
I'm confident of that because they were back on the bus. Kim, do you?
They took the early bus.
Right, that's what.
Till 7 bus.
Exactly.
Down to San Antonio.
Yeah, and they started first thing, and they were back up by pretty close to. They were leaving San Antonio at 9:30 after they'd received their 90 minutes of instruction. So their instruction in math was really beginning very quickly after the school day began. So that was another staffing element that we talked about. And then we also talked about with the reduction of Title I funding directly as a result of fewer students, there was also going to be fewer dollars to go to support those students, which again, at all of our schools, when we reduce Title I funding, that does mean fewer potential intervention services, fewer direct supports for those kids. But again, we know that in Summit, with the unique nature of how small the classes are and the limited number of bodies on the campus as a whole of adults educating, that our Title I instructors really do provide even additional support of just general supervision and aid to our wonderful teachers that we have in the class. So we talked about those being really the staffing changes that would also be necessitated as a result of this enrollment picture. That's all I have. If there's any questions, I can talk about either enrollment, staffing, or funding. But again, I think that we'll transition to Cheryl, who will talk about the other elements of what the challenges this picture really presents for both students and our staff.
It's my turn. So when I did go to Summit and meet with at the PTO meeting, I did share some of these concerns. Actually, Marilyn and I have been tracking the test scores for Summit for the last 2 years and have already seen concerns where approximately 20% less students up at Summit are meeting the standards compared to our other elementary students in the other 4 elementary schools. And so when I think of the impact of what it looks like for students at Summit next year in 18-19, I do have concerns that with smaller cohort sizes and the loss of some of the adult support in the classroom, that the academic progress for students will be even more impacted at Summit. So the lower cohort sizes do result in severe limitations to the learning environment, especially in Common Core. So back in 2010, we adopted the Common Core state standards in our state. This is
Cheryl, I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yeah.
For everyone's understanding, when you say cohort, what are you talking about?
I mean the number of students per grade level.
Right. So the fellow students at each grade. So
Exactly.
you're saying if
Like there's only going to be one
other kid in your grade as opposed to 20
only
or 30.
one fourth grader. Exactly. So that's what I'm talking about.
So when they say work with your desk mate
Exactly.
or work with your group on this project, there's no group to work with.
Exactly. So when you look at math, for example, in Common Core, and you look at the shifts from what we remember as traditional math lessons, students are now given the time and instruction in making sense of math lessons. And that's different from just a lot of memorization in the past, right? And that making sense that they're talking about involves a whole lot of discussion and engagement with their peers. Teachers support students' exploration of tasks, and then they lead debriefing discussions, and students debrief in their thinking. This is, again, different from simply solving problems using a procedure that the teacher taught you, and then you go to work independently on your own. Discussion questions that one might hear in math now, things like this. Can you explain the strategy you are using to solve this? Does that answer make sense? Why do you think that? How did you get that answer? Convince me that your solution makes sense. So when you're in a math class now, you're seeing really rich discussion among students on the subject matter at hand. It's not what we remember in math where you had math sheets and rows of problems where you just rotely, independently practiced what the teacher taught you. Students are now expected in math to construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. That's part of the math process on a daily basis. And so I did share this example, and I'll share it here. For example, in a class, you might put the problem 26 plus 27 on the board and ask students to solve it. So they'll solve it, you'll give them a few minutes. In a traditional classroom where you might have about 25 students in the cohort, you'll give them some wait time. You'll say, okay, who's got the answer? You'll see about 5 hands go up. You'll say, okay, I'm just gonna wait a little longer. I wanna see more hands go up. And you're waiting for 10 or 15 hands go up so that you know you're gonna have a lot of rich discussion. And then you'll call on a student, and one student will say, I have the answer, it's 53. And you'll say, well, how did you get that answer? And they'll say, well, I knew that with 26, that was the same thing as 20, and then 6 ones, and I knew that 27 was the same thing as 20 and 7 ones. So I put the two 20s together and I got 40. Then I had to count up 7 plus 6. And I got 13. And so then I knew that there were 10 more in the 10. So I added that to the 40 and I got 50. And there were 3 ones left over, so I got 53. That is an explanation that you would hear in a classroom, and you'd have other students, and you can literally see that students go, oh, like that's how they got it. And then the teacher will call on somebody else and they'll say, I got 53. And they'll say, well, how did you get your answer? And the student might say something like, well, I immediately saw that in 26 and 27, they both have 25 in them, and I knew that 25 plus 25 is 50 because we look at quarters a lot, and so we know 25s pretty well. And if you take 25 from 26, you have 1 left, and if you take 25 from 27, you have 2 left, and so that made 3 left over. So I knew I already had 50, so I got 53. This is just 2 of the potential of 10 different answers, and all of that discussion in a classroom leads to number sense among our students. It leads to them understanding and explaining their thinking and their rationale. And when kids get it wrong, that's just as important. Common Core celebrates that because a wrong answer allows for that discussion and that critique. Look, wait a minute, how did you get that? And I don't think that was right. That doesn't seem like the right answer. Here's why I think that answer is incorrect. And so all of that happens on a regular basis in a Common Core typical math class. And so when I see that there's only cohorts of 1 or 2 or even 3, I do feel like the environment for the students at Summit would really limit their exposure to all that rich thinking and all that rich discussion. When we look at the changes in language arts with the shifts now that we're in Common Core, one of the major shifts is they refer to it as daily encounters with complex texts. And that's a change from simply using leveled readers. So for example, if you're a 4th grade teacher, you know that in 4th grade you might have kids reading at a 2nd grade level all the way up to a 10th grade level, right? And everything in between. A whole lot might be at 4th grade or in that 3rd to 5th grade range. But you have a lot of range in a classroom. And so you might do leveled readers, and even our curriculum comes with leveled readers. So you have readers that you can give kids who are working below grade level, and the ones for kids that are on grade level, and the ones that are advanced. But daily encounters with complex texts mean that even though kids might work at their level, there's going to be daily times when the teacher guides them in an activity at grade level or above, and over an array of different genres or different types of reading. For example, Common Core shifted to more informational text, which is very different than reading literary text. There's a lot of different academic vocabulary when you're looking at informational text. So in that kind of a scenario, the teacher would pick a difficult text and usually engage the student by reading it first, or the students by reading it first to them, they have their books open too, then letting the students have a chance to independently read it on their own. And then the second piece to that would be a third reading together, not necessarily a reading, but then answering some questions. And the shift here in the questions in Common Core, it's no longer just simple who, what, when, where, why questions, simple basic comprehension questions. The students have to answer what they refer to as text-dependent questions and evidence-based analysis. So I was given an example, for one of the exemplar texts for 3rd grade is a book called Sarah, Plain and Tall. And if you were using that as your book for a 3rd grade group, you might ask this question. The theme of the story is sharing experiences makes families strong. Give an example of how the author uses to communicate this theme. In a classroom with lots of students in the cohort, they would each be going back into the book, and this is text-dependent questions, so that means you go back and you find text, you find a specific answer in the book that helps illustrate the answer to that question. When you only have 1 student in that grade level, you're only going to get 1 answer, maybe 2, right? But when you have a classroom of 30 kids, you're going to get potentially 10, 15, 20 different answers that all lead to the learning. And again, even with language arts, wrong answers are just as important as right answers, because that then allows kids to understand the idea of logic and reasoning and critique. And I'm not sure how you're making that connection that this answer fits the theme. I don't see how that works. Can you explain that more? And so all of that matters in the Common Core classroom. And I think it's important to know that when you look at our state testing, which we're in state testing season, our 3rd through 8th graders and our 11th graders take the SBAC test in language arts and math. I know my daughter had her first day of testing today as a 3rd grader at TOPA. So when you look at the test, and you can see it because you can go to the SBAC website and you can look at the practice tests. I mean, the tests our kids take you can't see them unless you're a student taking them, but you can see the practice tests. And I just want to emphasize that the tests of today, the tests that we have strong accountability in our state. It's our obligation to make sure that our kids learn these standards and are able to pass these tests, so to speak. When they sit down and take these tests, it's not like the tests we used to take where it's A, B, C, or D, and you're just going through the list, and it's pretty simple, informational recall, right? Today, the students have to explain their thinking. There's very few questions that are multiple choice at all. Most of them are short answer with 2 or 3 sentences of rationale. And in both language arts and math, there's a performance task portion of the test where you are writing an essay essentially proving your thinking and why you got the answer even in math. So if kids haven't practiced that all year long in a classroom with that rich discussion and creating those viable arguments and critiquing each other, then they're really not going to be prepared to do that on a written test that they have to take in the spring. So, those are some of the things that concern me. I do want to talk a little bit about the role of the teacher. That equally concerns me, and I wanted to quantify for you what it means to be responsible as a teacher to educate 4 different grade levels. So I looked at 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade standards. In language arts, you have to master, or you, as a teacher, you have to teach kids 34 language arts standards, and then of course make sure they master them. That's our job. 34 in 4th grade, 34 in 5th grade, and 22 in 6th grade. That's just language arts alone. In math, there's 25 math standards for 3rd grade, 28 for 4th grade, 26 for 5th grade, and 29 for 6th grade. In science, there's 18 for 3rd, 17 for 4th, 16 for 5th, 19 for 6th, and in social studies, there's 19 for 3rd, 32 for 4th, 44 for 5th, and 48 for 6th. Thank you for letting me quantify those, because I think it's really important to understand how difficult the job is for the classroom teacher who is trying to teach 4 different grade levels. And with those standards, with those grade levels come the curriculum, and it's not just one textbook. So if you're teaching math and you're responsible for 3rd grade math, you don't just become familiar with one 3rd grade textbook for math and then one 4th grade textbook for math and one 5th grade textbook for math. This curriculum comes with boxes of stuff. Manipulatives for kids to use as tools, supplemental teaching materials for kids to, or for teachers to provide intervention for some kids, or special activities for students that are language learners, or special activities for students that are advanced in the class. And so as a teacher, to try to become familiar, first master all those standards to make sure you can teach all those different grade levels, but then know all your curriculum pieces so that you can offer the right things to the students. That is really challenging in and of itself, but then you add the fact that we are going to have reduced adult support to help these teachers do that. All of those factors really concern me as I think about those students sitting in those classrooms with those teachers in 1920. And so I just kind of wanted to illustrate that for everybody. Do you guys have any questions on any of those things?
I do. Some of what you've described are conditions that have existed at Summit forever. I mean,
True.
It's a small school. So what's the flip side? I mean, obviously there must be some benefit at times to having a small group of students interacting with a teacher. You talked about the writing aspect of it. I would think that a teacher, being able to engage one-on-one more often with a student in the writing, for example, would probably be a good thing, as opposed to a class with 30 students. Looking at, I just assume that there would be more opportunity for that kind of interaction in a small class.
I think potentially you could assume that with a smaller number of students in your classroom that you'd have time to get around to each one and give them individual attention. And certainly when it comes to the student-teacher relationship, which is hugely important, I think that really does matter and is a benefit of a small classroom and a small school. But I'm not sure from the viewpoint of the teacher who has to teach these 4 different grade levels, and now with less adult support, how much time they're really going to have those individual conversations where you have what's usually called a writing conference. Like, let me see your written work and let's sit down together and edit it together, and I help you. I would love to think that would happen more in a smaller class size, but I worry that with the balance of everything else, and again, the difference this year is that we're going to have less adult support to help those teachers so that they can break away from the group to work individually or with a small group. So
different than having 10 students in 4th grade.
Absolutely different than 10
students at multiple grades.
And different than having 10 students in multiple grades and an extra adult in the room to help make sure everybody else is staying on task when you're over with one group or with one kid. It is very difficult to, when you're a combination teacher, let's say in the more traditional sense of teaching 2 grade levels, you really do expect a certain amount of independence among the students, right? You might teach one group a lesson and then leave them with an activity and expect them to be able to do the work while you're over working with the other group. And it's really difficult the younger the students are. And then you take away the adult support to be able to just simply be those extra set of eyes, right? We all know the teacher look, like get back to work, right? If you have that extra set of eyes helping do that throughout the period, you're going to be more confident that you have kids actually engaging in the work and able to do it and not get off task as much.
What has the parent volunteer aspect looked like at Summit? Because I know in years past I was that parent support person who took the other kid
Small
while
group.
the kindergarten class, part of them were here and there.
Absolutely.
And so I'm wondering if, while we don't have the ability to pay people to do that, is the parent support there?
That's a great question that I don't know the answer to. I don't know if Marilyn or
Our
Kim could.
parent, we have parents who come in and volunteer for art track, other extra activities like that. But art track is the one I can think of that's fairly consistent. We also have a neighbor who lives on Cesar Road who comes in 2 days a week and helps him in the primary class, just as a volunteer. Another parent across the street comes in to do painting and such with the primary class on Wednesday. So we do have parent volunteers, but it's certainly not enough to sustain an academic environment.
Andy, do you recall what year it was we reduced from 3 teachers to 2? I know it was before yours.
It was before me. I think it was 2012, but Mary Ann, do you?
Yeah, I have. We went from 3 teachers in 2012 and 13. We had 73 students. And then with 2 teachers, the following year was 62, then 38, then 42, then 43, then 43, and then 24 for this year. So prior to that, it was 3 teachers, and that was a point that I made. It was 3 teachers is the secret sauce. The Summit was 61, 49, or 2.5, or 2 and some. Or 2005 was 661, 2006 749, 2007 I got this numbers were 50, 2008 952, 2010 11.
Those were with 2 teachers?
These are 3 teachers. 2011.
Right, so those numbers, but that's the thing I do remember is
Yeah,
that
2012
when we
13.
reduced, we still had 62 students with 2 teachers.
Mhm.
It wasn't like the next year it went down to 38.
Correct. We went from 73 to 62 with the 2 teachers, and it continued to decline in numbers with the 2 teachers because the secret sauce of Summit is 2.5 plus teachers.
Thank you, Mary Ann. I knew you'd have that number.
Could we also clarify? I don't know if many people in the audience have the package, but could you tell me or explain what happened with the scenarios that we're looking at? Like, what are we to take from the scenarios?
I can, but Cheryl
Okay.
and Marilyn were actually part of the meeting that prompted the request, I believe, from the
Geo.
right to create that. So won't either of you share a bit about?
So what I'm talking about is in our package materials, there are 3 scenarios set forth.
At the PTO meeting,
Marilyn, why don't you hop up on the?
The
Just for the
PTO
microphone.
suggested that we have a survey of some kind, so we had 3 different scenarios. One, enroll at San Antonio, and it talked about there would be a bus in Upper Ohio to take the kids down to San Antonio. That was the first scenario, and it gave a little bit of information, I think, about their after-school care, because that's also a concern. And the second scenario would be stay at Summit, and the 6th graders would have to be bused down for math, for 6th grade math. And then the third scenario
Which
was...
basically, no change. Except
Right,
the
no
6th grade.
change, except for the busing down with
Right,
with
which was
math.
happening 2 years ago.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Just last year was the year we didn't do it, but the years
This year.
2 years before we were.
we were, right. And then the third scenario was,
An
no,
unknown, if some go and
Unknown.
some stay.
yeah,
Dumb.
undecided.
When we talked to the parents, we were talking about what could be,
Mm.
and so they were asking us, could you just put it on paper? So we really know what it would look like in both scenarios as best as possible at this point in time. So that was the hope of this, is that they'd actually be able to see what the options might look like.
And it seems like there's a little disagreement perhaps in terms of the number of students that we expect at Summit this coming year.
So
I think Marianne just said 24, this says 23, I've heard 19.
So when Marilyn and I first met with the PTO on, again, I believe it was May 10th, we were looking at 24 students at that time. After that meeting, I believe it was actually even before the follow-up meeting, we received notice of 5 drops, of 5 people, families or students who were either pursuing an alternative school within our district or potentially out of district. Marilyn and I just spoke earlier today, and she said we're now down to 18. Is that right?
18, that's correct.
There was one more reduction today.
And of those 18, it's interesting, 9 are within the Summit boundaries and 9 are interdistrict.
But I assume virtually all from the Santa Paula as opposed to the other way?
Mupu,
Oh yeah, I
Santa
know
Paula,
there's some from Fillmore.
Fillmore.
Yeah, but all that
But
direction.
nobody from
To
San
the east.
Antonio going up
Yeah,
the hill
to the
anymore.
east.
Oh, yeah, there is.
Maryland? So there was, of those 19, is there a student or 2 from the San Antonio district that's going up the hill?
You mean intra as opposed to
Yeah.
inter?
Of the 18, 9 are in the district.
Right, of those 9, are they all, well, we know that one was displaced due to the fire, but beyond that, are there any who are driving up the grade?
No.
That answers the question, right? That's what you're asking.
Yeah, just yellow.
Right, but she was in
We're
Upper
going
High
to try to avoid
student.
using student names or family names, but that was who I was referring to just now. So,
Okay.
Do we have students in Upper Ojai who are already going to San Antonio of their own volition? I
Yes.
assume? What does that
14.
look like? 14.
And that's pretty consistent year after year. It's 14, 13, 15 are going to San Antonio from the Summit attendance area.
I have 2 questions.
That was part of the 7-Eleven documentation, I think.
Sorry, the first one is that the kindergarten this year is 9. Correct, according to this. And then,
I believe we began the year at 9, and again, this is a case where we've had a number of students who have departed during the school year, and so we're, as of, again, the latest count, we were looking at 3 for this coming year, that's right.
but how many are
And 9
in the
is
class
this
right
year.
now?
You have 7?
7 kindergartners.
7.
And then, let's see, what was my second question? Oh, if I wanted to discuss a scenario slightly different, would it be best to do that after the public hearing?
Absolutely. So, just to again lay context for the board as well as for those in the audience who we appreciate the patience as we tried to lay a little of the groundwork for again the board's sake as well as those who weren't participants in earlier meetings up at Summit. Wanted to make sure that we understood the backdrop of analyzing this question. Of course, and I stated it in my memo, and I want to be very clear, we've looked at a whole bunch of things that can be seen on paper, although Cheryl does a nice job of bringing some of the things on paper to life. But we do realize the importance, and I know this board desires to have that feedback from families and from other stakeholders in our district, talk about Summit, both today and its future. Before we get there, though, before we conclude our presentation, we did want to have an opportunity for our 2 Summit teachers to speak. Then we will open it, or I'll hand it over to you, and assuming that you're ready to open up the public hearing. And then after that, I think would be a time for questions directed back to district staff or amongst yourselves. That would be kind of how we'd move forward. So, unfortunately, Sherry Usher, our upper grade elementary teacher, was not able to make it tonight. She has a master's class that she's taking. She did provide a statement that she wished for me to read. And then, Kim, I'm putting you on deck right now that once I finish reading Sherry's, we'll ask you to come up and stand by Marilyn and read your statement as well, or share your sentiment. So this is from Sherry, from our upper elementary teacher. Good evening. My name is Sherry Usher, and I'm one of 2 teachers from Summit Elementary School. I have very much enjoyed my 3 years as the upper grade teacher, working with grades 3 through 6. This year, my third year at Summit, with 3 support staff for 24 students, I felt I had a good handle on the program and learning was happening. With 1 classified and 2 part-time credentialed teachers, this configuration allowed for small group instruction and the ability to structure the curriculum so that all students received information from all subject areas. It is my belief that the program ran as well as it did due to the number of students per grade and the support staff that I had. It is my professional opinion that with too few students per grade and the projected reduced support staff, it would be difficult to continue to provide a quality program. So I'll provide that to you, and we'll have that as part of the record. And then Kim, we would request your thoughts as well. Do you mind if you, just for the purpose of the video, that's where the microphone is?
Hello, my name is Kim Eck. I have been involved with Summit School for 20 years. First as a parent, then as a volunteer and a classified employee, and now finally as a teacher. I have volunteered filing schoolwork, planting trees. I've worked with small groups, taught art trek, math, music. I've been a Girl Scout leader and a noon duty playground supervisor. When the families at Summit decided that having an after-school care program would help keep Summit students at Summit, I helped implement and directed that program for many years. When families decided that having a preschool program would help enrollment at the school, I designed and delivered that program for 12 years. Basically, if I thought it was needed and I could do it, I did. I'm a member of the Upper Ojai community, and the school has been my way of being involved. So now I feel the school is really at a crossroads. Do we again push for a way to increase Summit enrollment, or do we give up and send our kids down to San Antonio for their education? You've heard from the experts. I am dedicated to these students. Whichever way the board decides, whatever you decide to do, I want you to know I will always do my best to teach these kids, no matter how many or how few. What is best for the Upper Ojai community? That has been my thinking in the last few days. Certainly having a robust public school with at least 3 teachers, 75 or so students, and maybe a special emphasis would be best. However, without substantial assistance from the district and the community, I fear that is not an option. I'd love to hear that it can be. Here is my vision. This is my big picture vision. Summit could be a true community center with a satellite public library, a yoga studio, computer access, elder daycare program, solar electric panels. I'd love to see the grounds and buildings used by people who could really care for them, with maybe a maker space, more gardens, a farm and forest education program, as well as being a meeting place for our groups, our 4-H, Seize Our Water, Search and Rescue, and whatever our new Upper Ojai Council might envision. Summit could really be a place where we have potlucks and fundraisers for the whole community. I'd like to know how Ojai Unified can help us with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.
So are we ready to open a public meeting perhaps, if someone should so move?
Second.
All those in favor of opening our public meeting? Aye. I have a list of people who have asked to speak, and I think I know the order. If I flip it over, I'm starting at the first, right?
Flip it over,
Because you gave them
starting
to
at
me.
the bottom,
Right. This is the first person that got here, at the bottom.
perhaps.
Okay. Well, at any rate, and if anyone else would like to speak, please feel free to fill in a speaker card and hand it to Kathy, and we'll hear from you. That's really the driving purpose of tonight's meeting, is to hear from everyone. I hope you recognize that, from staff, there were presentations, but we also definitely want to hear all of your perspectives. So I'm going to start with Bonnie Brown. Bonnie, is that
Like me
pretty?
to approach.
Yes, you're going to be up there. Is that pretty accurate? You were one of the first people?
I'm happy to be one of the first people. Is that?
As far as you know, were you want to? I'm trying to do it in order.
I think it came, I don't know.
She was the last.
Kathy
Okay.
said
The
yes.
last.
Was I the last
Oh,
one?
shoot.
That's fine. Oh, okay. Anyway, good evening, members of the board and principals and the teachers and parents and concerned people. I'm Bonnie Brown. I am a 43-year-long resident of Upper Ojai. Children went through Summit, and I have 2 comments or questions to address the board with. My first is there a way that the board, the Ojai board, could reach out, or the district could reach out to other districts in the area to try and enhance the cohort school membership of Summit to make this a 60 viable, student viable school, to really support that 12-member waiting list at MUPU if somebody would want to come, or the other folks that might, to really enhance what Summit could, the vision of what Summit could offer. So is that a possibility? Secondarily, long ago, my father-in-law, William Brown, sat on the Summit school board with Carl Hofmeister and other longtime families. I was not privy to be there then, but his son, my ex-husband, thought there was a document created that said if the Summit was no longer a school, could that property and facilities be returned to the community? I didn't know if that document exists and it's still in someone's possession. That I wanted to address as well. But just could we support gathering other students elsewhere in this Ventura County area? And does that document exist? Thank you.
Thank you. Andy, would you care to answer to the extent you
Are we
can?
allowed to answer this in public? And
Yeah.
It's
on
agendized.
agendized.
I do not know if there's that document. I reviewed the deed during part of the 7-Eleven conversations because there were some sentiments within the community that there was a few schools that may have certain burdens to the deed. I had not seen anything, but we can look more into our archives to see if there's a separate board action that may have been taken. If that's what you're thinking, it doesn't appear to be attached to the deed, but it's possible that there was board action. We can try to look into that. With regard to the reaching out to other districts, I speak to the other districts, throughout the entire county, not just our small ones, but all districts frequently. I, in fact, had a conversation with Cheryl, the superintendent of MUPU, earlier today, with regard to being able to increase the enrollment to that 60 or more sweet spot for this coming year. I don't think anyone has a playbook for that. I think long term, can we be trying to find potential best practices or other ways that we really build up? I think it's been tried really extensively, certainly from the site. I don't know the extent to which the district can say that we have done everything that was possible over the past decade plus on our end to enhance enrollment, increase enrollment from San Paula. There's a few factors for that. One was that for a while San Paula closed their borders to us. It doesn't appear that to be the issue anymore. But I certainly struggle to imagine a scenario where we go from the 18 students up to a 60 plus student site within the 3 months.
Do you know, I don't know that you would have this number, what is our percent of declining enrollment in the districts?
Give me the time span that you'd like it for.
Well, okay, I mean.
Are you saying just generally since the past decade?
Yeah, we've been
Well,
in declining enrollment.
Since we've been in declining enrollment, our peak enrollment was just around 4,200, and right now, as of about 2 weeks ago, we're at 2,397. So we're 2,400 down to 4,200 down to the reverse of those 2,400 is our overall district reduction in enrollment. So more than 40% decline district-wide. If you look to the kindergarten cohorts and the lower elementary grades, we're actually looking at something greater. Our current enrollment decline is actually, we haven't hit the potential bottom, we suspect, because we are seeing smaller incoming kindergarten cohorts still relative to the middle school or the junior high and the high school cohorts. So we think that we are likely looking at a future. The elementary schools are nearly there already. We are looking at a future of the district-wide being about 2,100 students, 22, maybe approaching 23 in that range. So we'll be approaching even closer to a 50% overall decline in enrollment over the past 20 years. Within the past 5 years, we're looking at about a 20% decline in enrollment district-wide.
So that's my question. I mean, the idea of a big enrollment to get us up to 50, it's not, in my personal opinion, what we're doing wrong up there. It's declining. 40% of the number 62 is, you're losing at least 25 students. So how do you gain those back when even the district as a whole can't get them? When Ventura is losing, and that's, I think, we're lucky that districts are still allowing students to leave and go to other districts when everyone, even this morning's paper, there was an article about per 1,000 women, how many babies are being born, and it's the lowest it's been since like 1963. And we're no longer replacing ourselves, right? If you assume a man and a woman have 2 children to replace themselves, we're not doing that anymore. So I'm not sure that there's a great effort that can be made when the babies aren't out there to
I had the privilege of meeting with Carol Hawley, former administrator and teacher within our district, last week, and she talked about her experience and knowledge of Summit when there were more than 100 residence kids who were attending Summit. Now you look at the residence kids, we're in the mid-30s who are potential residence kids, although again half of them go, or not quite half, but go to San Antonio. So no question to your point, Jane, is that we look at, and again I'm sure the longtime residents up there I'm sure would have similar anecdotal information as far as the number of children that were in the upper Ojai area 20, 30, 40 years ago compared to what we're seeing now.
Lonnie, where are you? In answer to your last question, I think we're all really mindful of how important Summit is to the community up there as a place, as a community center. So that would certainly always be on our mind to the extent we would have control over that. I'm going to move it along. Thea Wilcox. I'm sorry, am I generally getting the people that signed up early? Because I'd like to try.
You're messing it up completely.
I actually think the stack might be upside down. I think.
Okay, because I know I saw Chris and Angie get here really early, and you're like next.
Job.
So.
I'm glad you care.
I think there was actually an order to the first half and then a different.
I go to a psychiatrist for ordering.
Okay, so I really want to bring the focus back not to how we're going to fix Summit over time, not to talk about low enrollment, not to talk about all these things, what can happen, a magnet, a chart, are we losing kids, are people having babies, what's going on? What's happening right now in 3 months is a school year starting. And there's families up there that want to know what's happening. So,
Yeah.
I know. Okay.
And now we have to do this again.
Okay, so I'm here to talk about the immediate situation involving the school this coming August. Did you just take a picture of me crying? I'm sorry, laughter is my relief. Okay, listen, this is no ordinary school year. This isn't just a regular school year with low enrollment. We recently, as a community, have survived the largest fire in California history. Upper Ojai residents were evacuated. Weeks and weeks, had no power for weeks, lived in trailers, or are still living in trailers. Lost their homes, part of their homes, and have had to do hours upon hours of cleanup. All due respect to Common Core, I do not want my children to suffer any more upheaval this year if they lose a little bit of the academic to save the emotional, then it's worth it. I want continuity. I want stability. I realize that we're asking you for more than what other schools get, but I think we deserve it. And we're just asking for you to give us this year, to give us our 2 teachers, to maintain the aides that are not paid for, to promise that they will be there, to provide what we got this last year. Our Upper Ojai community has suffered the brunt of the damage sustained by the Ojai Valley, and we are asking for the support that we deserve. This is the time that the school district should come to stand with us and help us. I want every child that wants to stay at Summit for the next school year to be able to do so with the same resources they have this year, and I think that is a very fair expectation. I am not asking you to promise that Summit will stay open indefinitely. We are all very aware of the big picture and understand enrollment is low. We are asking you to support us in our recovery. We are asking for one transitional school year to provide our students and families with a stable environment to process what has happened and to make plans for the future. Thank you.
I live in a trailer in her driveway.
Well, I hope it goes without saying that this whole subject, as it comes in the context of the fire, is one that I think everyone on this board is very, very aware of all the sacrificing and the suffering that's occurred up in the Upper Ojai. And I will only speak for myself. I'm personally sorry that we're having to have this conversation, but it is a conversation we do have to have. We have to have this conversation because of the numbers of students that we're seeing at Summit this year. So,
Thanks, Henry.
I can't pretend like I really feel your pain, but I really want you to believe, and I hope you do, that we all really understand this.
And I appreciate the feedback. I just want to bring the board's focus to this next school year. The reason why you're seeing 5 people, applying for district transfers is because after the meeting with Andy, people want to know where they're going to be. They're trying to supply their children with a plan. They're not going to sit around and wait until it becomes an agenda item and the board decides. Everyone's going to be gone by then. These are people that just lived through a natural disaster. They're by no means just going to sit there and wait for the plan to come from Andy or the school board or anything else. That's why I'm saying that it's either say, we will supply you with what you need for the year, or you won't. But we need to know, and we would like to be supplied with what we had. We understand it's asking a lot, but it was an extraordinary year. And it's not, insane to give that to our children.
And in fairness, Andy, I know, was extremely sensitive to the question of, and everyone understands this idea of, that moment where you're like, do I acknowledge that we have an issue, and in doing so, potentially have some other people decide that they're going to make other plans? But we feel, and hopefully anyone who watched this board, we're really into transparency here. So we wouldn't feel good if we knew that we had a really small cohort up at Summit, and then we just didn't say anything because we didn't want anything else to happen. I mean, there are parents who I assume would be happy to know the information and make their decision accordingly, and that's kind of how we have to operate here.
I agree. Can I just say one other thing to you, Kevin? After Cheryl's presentation, which was extremely informative and very helpful in understanding how we're not going to meet Common Core, your question was, but what is the good part about Summit? When Andy came to have his meeting, and even when Cheryl was at the PTO, great dialogue, great information, no positive parts.
none of the school district is ready to provide you with this to offset what you're going through. Nothing. All just information, which is great. Information's wonderful, but you also have to temper that with some positivity, some type of direction. What do people just do with a bunch of negative information?
And again, I think the reality is that Andy couldn't be in a position to say, here's what the district will do, because it will be the decision of the board what the district will do.
But I don't think, excuse me, but I don't think they investigated what the positives are there. They didn't present them. They didn't present them here today, really, either. You know, and I think that's a big part of it.
Well, we're going to continue to hear from stakeholders and others who want to speak, and then we're going to keep talking. As you know, today's we're not acting on anything today. We're listening, and asking, and talking. So, Angie Janassi.
I don't want to follow you. I'm Angie Janassi, and I'm here to speak as a teacher, a community member, and as the Ojai Federation of Teachers president. First, as a community member, because I want to address what you just spoke to. What I saw this year was such an amazing community up in Upper Ojai. And my husband was on the 7-Eleven committee for closing schools. And one of the first things I said to him was, I am so glad Summit didn't get closed, because it's such an important place for that community. And you could see it during the fire. And you could see how important it was for everyone to have a place to come together and what it means to that community. And yet, at the same time, our end of the community on Highway 33, we suffered 7 homes burnt and they're gone. Several other outbuildings. The fire came right to my front door. And so I too understand the PTSD that you're going through. It's horrible, it's difficult, and we're all suffering that. As a community, I think we're all suffering from the emotional trauma and the physical loss from the Thomas Fire. But school must go on, and life does go on, and we each have to march forward. And it's very difficult. It's not an easy thing to do. So as a teacher, when I look at Summit, I have taught multiple grades. My first few years of teaching, I did a 3, 4, 5 class. I did a 4, 5, 6, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade student class. And I've done multiple age teaching. And it's just perfectly doable if you have support in the classroom. It's a wonderful experience if it's not you alone. And I've had many years where I was did combination classes without support in my classroom. And so as a teacher, when I look at this, my colleagues, I think without the Title I funding, without the necessary small school funding, without the support that comes with that funding, I think that the task before those teachers is very, very difficult. It's unfair because what you do as a teacher, you're always striving to do the best for your students. And what I think is it's very difficult to be successful and feel good about what you do if you don't have the support to do the job well. For those students, I feel for them. Okay, I feel for them because I'm concerned that 2 kindergartners isn't enough for those kids to really have a play group. And I know there's 4 first graders, but kindergartners are very different than first graders. When I see kindergartners with second graders, I know that they can do it, but that's like when I taught, it was at a private school. So I made my own curriculum for those kids, but we don't get to make our own curriculum. We have a set curriculum, and trying to do that for each one of those grades is very difficult, and meshing those kids together is very difficult. So I feel like for their social skills, the curriculum, it's a very difficult task. I think for the Ojai Federation of Teachers, while I agree, you guys deserve support, and I 100% agree with you. I don't necessarily believe that the support has to come from the school system. Your responsibility is to 5 elementary schools, a junior high, and a high school, and I really and truly believe that we have to think globally. We have to think of the whole group. And I don't think, personally, that putting funds from the general fund to keep this school going is right for the rest of the district.
Thank you. Questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
We've heard about aides and we've heard about volunteers, and I'm not exactly clear the role of an aide versus a volunteer. Would the loss of the aides be able to be supplemented by volunteer work?
Yes and no. It can depend. I mean, some of our, some of the support staff, they were credentialed teachers, so there's a certain amount of expertise and training that comes when you have that kind of a level. And then depending on aid work, it depends on how much training you've had. So I'm not exactly sure how much training they've had, but for example, there are lots of intervention programs and materials that aides might have been trained in so that when they deliver to students, they have that foundation. Depending on what that is, you may or may not be able to use a volunteer to do it. It depends on the complexity of what you're asking them to do. In many cases,
depends on the volunteers.
It depends on the volunteers too. In many cases, a volunteer can do some academic support. They can, pull reading groups aside, especially with the younger students when reading aloud to somebody is really important. Those kind of things they certainly would be able to do easily.
Kim, did you have any comment?
Well, I use both an aide and volunteers, and my aide here is highly knowledgeable of our curriculum and is able to pick up a lesson plan that I hand to her and teach a lesson to a small group. Volunteers, sometimes you can get ones that can do that, but when they're volunteers, they don't always, I have a doctor's appointment, can't come, which is completely valid because they're volunteers. But Casey is here every day with me, and my volunteers have been pretty steady, but I can't always count on them. And then I'm kind of left in the lurch. So aides are much more steady and important.
I'm mixing this up. Danielle Batista.
Hi, my name is Danielle Bautista. I'm one of the volunteers that Mrs. Eck was talking about. I teach art check to both classrooms for the last 2 years by myself. I come every other week. I'm also the director of Condor Care and will be next year's PTO president, so I'm there all the time.
Well, I'm sorry, director of what?
Condor Care. Their after-school program.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm there in the morning and there in the afternoon and then there in the middle of the day. Okay, so once again, we're here fighting for our school to be open. It has been a long and weary battle that feels to many of us that we are fighting alone. We, as in the parents of Summit, feel that over the years, we have made tremendous strides against many odds to keep our school open, and every time we succeed, we turn around and are right back to where we started. Why is that? I understand the decreasing enrollment at Summit is not ideal, and that without students, there is no school. But how do we keep students without necessary resources from you all? How are we as parents going to keep the school going on our own? We need your help. Why is there no plan for our school from our school board members? Is this not your job? Instead of plans and positivity of what we can do to keep our schools open, we're giving meetings where we are the only ones giving suggestions. and strategy, and where every positive and wonderful thing about Summit is turned into a negative. And yes, we are having our third meeting about this, but where is the action? While you all feel that more discussion is necessary, I really feel that leaving us in limbo is unfair. The fear that was put in the water at the meeting with Mr. Cantwell prompted me to immediately pull my kids from the district for fear that they might not have a place like Summit to make them feel safe. Many other parents have been scrambling to find a plan B. Isn't it sad that we can't commit to the school we love because our district can't commit to us? And because of the Ensure plan for Summit, parents continue to try and get their plan B, and with every inter-district transfer, our numbers continue to decline. Summit has been around as long as it has because we are special. There is a wonderful community that takes place up on that hill with these kids and their families that you will not see down here. Just because you don't see us does not mean that we are not there. We are here year after year in this long fight, and now we are screaming for your help. Now I know politics are in the back of your mind, and we had this disaster, and it's just this bad situation. But we need necessary resources. And back a few years ago, not adding the third teacher, and while yes, there were 73 students, and you lost the third teacher, and there was still 60 some. Yes, but that loss of that teacher put us in that downward spiral where we have yet to recover. So what's done is done, but we need you to make it right. We need you to commit to giving Summit one more year, no matter how many students we have returning. In that year, there needs to be a plan set forth to figure out how to save the school. If there's still a decline despite legitimate efforts, then yes, we will probably be in the same situation next year. But I truly feel that if the district really and truly gives Summit the support we need, then we will thrive once again. We can't keep our families and their students without giving them a plan of action. We have done what we can above and beyond what parents and other schools do, and now we're putting it to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question. Did you just say you're pulling your kids from Summit?
I had to get a plan B. I definitely did. While, the transparency of it all, what the situation looks like and things like that, with the numbers and whatever, it didn't really, Mr. Cantwell didn't really make it clear that Summit would be here next year. It was a kind of, well, we don't know. I couldn't promise it. That, right, like you were all looking at numbers and where to put your teachers and things like that. Well, other districts are doing that. And just because I really felt like the solution to the problem was, well, just send your kids to San Antonio. Well, just like some people don't want to send their kids to Summit, some people don't want to send their kids to San Antonio. So everybody's scrambling looking for a plan B because there was this, well, we might not be here next year, and you might not be able to get your kid in another school next year because everyone's deciding now. Well, exactly. So now everybody's putting in inter-district transfers, and then our numbers go down and down. But we have to have a plan B because we have no security.
I will say I think that is unfortunately the condition we're in. As a school board member, my job is to be a fiduciary for this whole school district, and to say that the school board could just, or Andy or anyone could just say, no matter how many students are at a school, we guarantee you'll be open. That's not how I don't think we could operate.
Frankly, the easiest answer would have been to close it. The fastest, most definitive answer would have been to close Summit. Just like that. The reason that we're having these conversations is because people are seeking desperately alternatives. So we apologize that it's taking some time, but I think in the long run it's time that you would appreciate we spend, because I think you'd feel even less paid attention to and less respected if we had just come out and said the numbers don't bear it, we're shutting it down. Now you have your answer. So I agree. Life isn't always pleasant and it's not always fun, and sometimes really bad stuff happens, and we all take time to recover from it. Because we want a simple answer doesn't mean a simple answer exists. And I understand the frustration that people are feeling. But everything that I've seen is that the changes at Summit have come as a result of declining enrollment. I don't think the changes were the cause of the declining enrollment. So I listened to the instructor at the school tell me that volunteers are valuable but unreliable. And I wonder if the school is so desperately desired, why we don't have a solid base of volunteers. If we take it forward another year, they're going to need that help. And I don't see how it's viable without that. If it lasts beyond this 1 year, it's going to take more. And so it's not just for the board to do. It's for the parents to step up. It's for the community to step up. And yes, this board has a responsibility to come up with strategies and ideas. But I think it's a cop-out to dump it on the board and say the board needs to figure this out. I don't volunteer at Summit, so I don't know what the community is willing to do for the school. But the fact is, the funding in this district is very thin, and it is going to be a hard decision as to whether or not to invest in a school with money that is currently being spent elsewhere to maintain that school. And that's really what we're looking at, is where do we take the money from? Who do we take it from to put it at Summit? Because it's a special school. And I get that. I totally get that. Life isn't always fair. It isn't always what we want. This board bent over backwards not to close one of our neighborhood schools when we had the 7-Eleven committee. We took a lot of heat for some of that decisions from some folks. So there's no great desire here to run and close a school. So I understand that the lack of an answer is really difficult. Unfortunately, I think that's kind of where we are right now, in a really difficult spot. So please don't rush the decision, because I don't think good decisions get made when they're rushed. There's a lot of stakeholders and a lot of implications into this. So, I regret that any parent feels that the board doesn't care, because I don't think that's true by any of these members. But we also do our business in a deliberate and a thoughtful way. And I think that's what you would prefer in the long run, no matter how painful it is right now.
So Michael, I would like to, just having been a volunteer parent, switch it to, as much as parents might want to, a lot of them are working and don't have that ability. So to ask the parent, I think the parents who can help, do help, probably 85% of the time. I think tonight is a good time to hear those things and add, maybe add a couple of scenarios. That's what I was asking. You just added a scenario is keep it open and don't reduce. That's not an option here. Let's put it on as an option to discuss. And that's why it's hard that Andy can't make decisions without us. We can't make them until we're all together. We can't get all together until we put it in the paper and announce it and give 72 hours. So there are those legal matters that have to be put in. But I think it's important, I hope, that tonight we can say, we've put it all on the table, we have these options, we need to vote on them at next week's meeting, if we can, so that parents can have that decision. We can't make it tonight because you have to have, the legal matter is, make it a public meeting, then you have a certain announcements after the public meeting, and then you can vote. So
actually, a slight amendment to that is we could have definitely put this on the agenda for a vote, but we chose not to because we wanted to have one meeting that was just solely devoted to hearing, listening, talking, and discussing all the possibilities. So,
Danielle, can I ask a follow-up question? It sounded to me like the subtext of what you were saying was if we put 3 teachers back at Summit, that the enrollment would increase. Is that what you were saying?
I definitely think so.
You think so?
I definitely think so. I think it's to have it known to the public that there was going to be some big changes made at Summit. I think that we would definitely get a lot of people up there. We have a lot of students that left specifically because we lost our 3rd teacher.
So I'm hearing that there's, let's say 24 right now and 14 at San Antonio, so that would take us to, do the math.
38.
38, thank you. I'll go back into the math eventually, but.
This
cohort
Do
will
you-
support
We
you.
could talk
about how we got to
Do
38.
you see more than that 38? Do you think there's the potential? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, yes, I do.
Where would they come from?
Because we have more than half of our students coming from Santa Paula as it is. People are willing to make the drive if there's something to offer them.
Okay. That was, thank you, that helps.
I also just, and I don't know that it's something that you can answer, but I would like feedback on it. It's the flip side of that coin. And that is, how small is too small? If 24 is not small enough to not have classes at Summit, what is the number? Is it 18? Is it 15? Is it 1? I think it would be helpful to understand what the sentiment is there, that, and maybe the answer is 1. But
For the next year.
Well, really, I believe this is too small. I would say it's too small. If it hadn't been that what happened this year happened to our particular community. Yes, you all suffered, but that was horrific, right up there, all those children, right up there. Normally, I would totally side with you and say, it makes much more sense. I'm a business person.
well, I don't have a side.
I'm not siding with you, I'm just saying, I could definitely see, I would have had no issue whatsoever. I'm from Ojai, I'm okay with, I get it, but it's different. It's not the right circumstance. It's not the right thing to do.
My concern with a one-year like scenario for that purpose, because that makes a lot of sense to me in terms of just the emotional well-being of everyone, is that you would get the same scenario where people say, I'm not going to go there if it's just for 1 year. It's a first grader. I might as well start them where they're going to be. So that again.
That's true. That's a very good point. That's why it should be for whoever wants to go. You have to commit to that. It's a very good point.
I mean, the other thought I've had lately is, I really, a little historical context. So 40 years ago in the district, we had about the same number of students we have now. And I don't know, 40 plus, yeah. I don't know, I wasn't here. I don't know if anyone thought that 20 years forward that there would be twice as many students. I don't know, but we did. Our numbers doubled. And now we're back down to half of what we had 20 years ago. I'm uncomfortable with the idea of closing a school because we could be part of a longer term, multi-generational cycle. But at the same time, holding classes everywhere may not make sense either. And so that's kind of where my thinking is, and I totally sympathize. The thing I disagree with, just on the face of it, and my mind can be changed, is I change my own mind all the time. I don't even need your help. But it's, I really don't like the idea of saying, let's keep it open one more year and then close it.
Yeah.
Because I kind of don't like that direction.
Right. I guess speaking to
Right.
kind of what Michael said, without the aides, there really is no way to keep the school even at 24. So like he said, the volunteers, people work. They can't come. So without those aides, like they are now, it would be very difficult.
But there are other resources in Upper Ojai. There's Thomas Aquinas College, there's Passat School, and I don't think the school has ever endeavored to get volunteers from those local schools, which I think would be a good education for them and highly beneficial for the students.
Yeah, I think the thing that I think hurt us the most at Summit, and just my personal opinion, was a few years ago when Santa Paula said, we're not going to allow students to come up.
Yeah.
I think that's what hurt us. And maybe the situation has changed. But that act then is what has had a multi-year negative impact on what we're doing.
So can I ask a clarifying question? What I read in here was if we were considering potentially abandoning Summit for 1 year. Did I misinterpret that as were we discussing closure?
So the agendized item for tonight, the public hearing was the board is asked to hold a public hearing on whether to maintain open Summit Elementary School for the 2018-19 school year or to temporarily combine the instructional program to San Antonio Elementary School pending increased enrollment in 1920. No action will be taken at this hearing. So
it just seemed
Yeah, I was going to ask, but anyone else have comments? We've had lots of board comments, and so I haven't moved on because of that. Mike, are you done? Mm-hmm. Let's hear from Jim Bailey.
So I just really wanted to come here to listen tonight, but I was actually asked to speak by Marianne Ratcliffe, and so I want to honor that. If you don't know who I am, I taught in OUSD for 9 years. I think I came in during that bubble, and I got pink slipped when the bottom started falling out of Matilaha. So I personally understand the pain of declining enrollment, and it was tough to recover from. But time has led me to a place where currently with my wife we run an enrichment center, a learning center for homeschool families in Upper Ojai. The majority of our families do homeschool through a public homeschool charter school, and we are on tap next year to serve 87 students, and they come from many different places. I'll share some data with you that come to the Upper Ojai to be with us.
Can you repeat that? Something about 87 students.
So
I like
yeah.
that. I like that word.
Yeah. And I want to get to the point that I think there is a potential vision for Summit School next year in the future if the district can't find a way to make it work as is, as an opportunity to have it as a base, a learning center for homeschool charter school families. Families that might choose to homeschool, but then have a resource center to come to 2, 3, 5 days a week. Anyhow, we have 4 from Santa Paula. I'll share the data real quick. 10 from Thousand Oaks, 22 from Ventura, 9 from Oakview, 6 families from Upper Ojai students, 34 from the Valley, 1 from Camarillo, and 1 from Oxnard. Of those 87, 12 were at OUSD last year, but left OUSD to do homeschool charter school program. Kim is my neighbor. I taught at Summit for 4 years as a science specialist. I love Summit. I have really good memories of being with those kids, and a vision that as Natasha and I talked would be to if Summit wasn't going to be used by the district, to step over there and keep it going as a community school that it is, maybe sharing it with other community organizations, depending on what goes on with the council. But say a family that still worked 5 days a week and couldn't just homeschool, they could still have their kid come for support and assistance for some of those homeschooling things. We work with a homeschool charter called Inspire, but in the long run, I see no reason that a charter couldn't be started here in the Ojai Valley that would do a similar model, operate on a similar model and meet the growing number of families who are interested in homeschooling their kids in this day and age where so much is available via the computer, and the teachers and the same gatekeeper they once were. So that's what I'd like to share with you
How
guys.
many days a week do they come to you?
So they come through, those who come through the Inspire Homeschool Charter School come 2 days a week. There are some families that separately pay us to come for more days. I would say to the families in Upper Ojai that are up there, that if they signed up with the homeschool charter school and came 2 days a week, but needed some support for more days, I think we would waive our fee for that because, we were there firsthand and saw the devastation, we've lived through it with our neighbors, 6 families on our street without homes. So, that would be a place that they could be and still stay at their school and without any extra fee. We normally charge an extra fee for that, for the nonprofit to operate. But I think for those families, that would be something that could be waived, at least for that first year. But does that answer that question, Jane? Yeah. So, thank you, board. Thank you, community, and I love Kim's vision that is the vision that I'd love to see there. Yeah, I'd love, well, I don't know.
Anyone have an Barbara Weiser?
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much for meeting with us tonight. I just want to point out that we do recognize that you guys have bent over backwards for us, as you did, 2 years ago? And I just want to also say that the parents at Summit, we also bend over backwards. We really do. I think we put in, this is just an aside, but we put in almost as much funding, you can confirm this, for AIDS as the district does, is that right? So as a PTO, we do. So I think it's coming from both sides, which is great to have that community effort. That was just an aside. So what I do want to talk about is kind of a future vision, just to kind of build on what was brought up earlier, and talking about Summit being a small school. I feel like we're often asked, what does Summit have to offer? And we have to offer just being a small school. We serve Ojai and Santa Paula area, and there are currently 3 other small schools that are serving that area that are often full, and parents and students are on waiting lists to get into almost every year. Mupu, Briggs, and Santa Clara schools are all in that area, serving Santa Paula students. And what Summit has that's unique to the other Ojai schools is that we are so close to Santa Paula, and we can serve those students. I think we did take a hit when Santa Paula closed its borders, and when we lost 2 teachers, or we lost our 3 teachers, our 3rd teacher. But I think now Santa Paula is probably more open to that. I'm currently a teacher at Santa Paula High School, and enrollment there is booming. It's not declining at all like it is in Ojai. We are looking at the high school adding 2 more teachers next year alone, and that's all. And probably more. I only know about the math and science department because I teach science, so that's where I know the teachers are coming in. Just because there's so many students coming in.
Barbara, do you have kids at Summit?
I have, my son is in 6th grade, so he's graduating, and my daughter is in 4th grade. Yeah. So
where's your son gonna go?
Probably Mupu, because I work, and Mupu is 1 minute from my house. And if we went to the Tillaha, we'd have to get to the bus by 6:40 in the morning, and that would take, and so we'd have to leave the house at 6:20 in the morning. And anyway, we're still deciding. Actually, we're still deciding about that. So anyway, just so to go on. So Mupu, Briggs, and Santa Clara are often full. They're small schools. A lot of parents are looking for small schools. Mupu, as of today, is 59% inter-district. 81 of their 143 students are from Santa Paula, 9 are from Fillmore, and 2 are from Ventura. They have a waiting list of 16 students, and they like to keep their classes maxed at 20. So they don't allow that many more students in. So there's people trying to get into Mupu. And I assume Briggs and Santa Clara are probably in a similar situation. In the past 10 years, Mupu has experienced increased enrollment and is expecting continued growth. Santa Paula Unified School District is expecting increased enrollment, and as you are probably aware, there are 3 housing developments going in process right there. The Harvest at Limonera is going to build 1,500 homes. 1,500, so many that they're considering building a K-5 school in addition. But that takes time, so we could possibly serve those families. The Hardison House, 34 homes, that's right along the 150. Going towards Santa Paula, just inside Santa Paula, and then on the other side of the Oaks in Santa Paula, a housing district of 19 homes. So that means more families coming in, more students. So we could potentially tap into that resource and build on our enrollment. If Ojai has declining enrollment, we could go into Santa Paula and get some of those students, and that would help the district here. I think in Ojai, people are having less children, it's true, but I think also Ojai is very expensive. We moved out of Upper Ojai because we can't afford rent in Ojai, so we moved to Santa Paula. So I think a lot of families are in similar situations. So I think that's another reason for declining enrollment is just the price of housing in Ojai. It's so expensive for people with families. But that being said, Santa Paula has those 3 big housing developments coming in. And I think Summit's in a unique position to take those students, especially families that are looking for small schools, and they're unable to get into Mupu, Briggs, or Santa Clara. I think there's a market out there. Summit is 9 minutes from my house in Santa Paula, and if there's students coming from Thousand Oaks to go to a non-traditional school, 87 students going to a non-traditional school in Upper Ojai, I think we could probably find a lot of families that want to go to a small traditional school. I mean, I think that would be, I think it's a different market that is going on over there, but I think that we could find, I mean, there's a lot of parents that also want traditional schools, and I think that we could find that and get that population. I think we just have to reach out. And it would take a community effort between the board and parents. I mean, the parents can't do it all, the board can't do it all. And we can talk and just advertise. When we talked about having a lot of students go to bigger schools, I did a little meta-analysis research, and there isn't any conclusive evidence as to whether a big school is better or big class sizes are better than a small class size. And I realize, and I do respect Common Core, and I teach Common Core also, and I teach NGSS. So I'm also working with those standards that are adopted by California schools. But it's not conclusive that big schools are better or big classes are better than small classes or small classes are better than big classes. There's just no conclusive evidence. Some's better for some students and some is better for other students. So I think we have a potential gold mine going on. I mean, I know that maybe that we can't get these students in the next 3 months. Maybe we can if we can put in 3 teachers, if that's an option. I mean, I know you guys have talked about this. I'm not sure what the possibilities are, but I think that Summit could get those students if we did have the 3 teachers, and if we could guarantee that we're going to be open for longer. I think that the resources are there. I think people in the area want the small schools, so I think we could do it. I think we could have it, and I think Summit is it's not very far. It's 10 minutes from Santa Paula. I think people are willing to drive to do that. So that's all I have to say.
Can I ask a question about that? Because I've heard a lot the last time at the Septarts at 7-Eleven for school closures, and this evening is that Upper Ojai families said, we're not going to drive down that hill, which is 10 minutes. I've timed it from Summit to San Antonio's door is 10 minutes. So it's interesting to me that you'll say parents will drive that 10 minutes from Santa Paula, but Summit parents they feel like that's too long of a drive to go down to.
Have you driven from Upper Ojai down to San Antonio in rain?
That is a pretty
as a
windy
matter of
drive.
fact, it was raining that day, but I mean, I'm just saying. I feel like if I was in Santa Paula, oh my God, the whole.
Well, I think it's because parents looking for small schools would be willing to drive.
So does Mupu have a special program, something special is it just small, or is it a magnet of?
I don't believe that Mupu is a magnet. But I think it's just the small school environment, and I don't think Santa Clara or Briggs are magnets either. I think they're just small schools, and they're traditional and they're public, so they follow the Common Core and GSS also. I think as far as the drive, I think it's because we have a small school there.
I'll call on you in a second, but Barbara, just to be clear, because I'm particularly interested in your perspective since you're a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So you had both your kids at Summit throughout their careers, or how long?
Yeah. So actually, from preschool on, so they've both been. My son has been there. What did I say? He's been there since he was 4, and now he's in 6th grade. So 9 years. He was there for 9 years, and my daughter will be there through 5th grade because they're going to move 6th grade to Matilaha. Right. That's not after next year. Right.
Yeah.
So
a year from now.
Right.
A year and a half from now.
Oh, she's a 4th grader.
Right.
So my son and my daughter were both there since my daughter started when she was 3 at the preschool. So we've been there a long time.
And from your perspective, obviously the smaller, very small environment was good.
Yes. My son, we are going. He's going into 6th grade, and we toured Isbel. We toured Mupu. We toured Matilaha. Aside from the 6th grade going down, we went down separately, and he just doesn't like big schools.
But he's going into 6th, so he's going to go
going
into
into
middle
7th
school.
grade.
Oh, 7th. Okay, so he's going to. Cool.
Mhm. And we went to Isbell, and Isbell has phenomenal resources. They've got mega Title I funds coming in, and they've got all sorts of stuff. They've got an amazing band. They've got AV equipment. They've got a green room. They've got all sorts of great modern equipment. It was great. And then Matilla also has very good resources like that
And
too.
so I
And
mean,
then-
I don't know how much you watched our 6th grade going over, but that's really what drove us
Mm-hmm.
was the idea of aggregating our resources at
Mm-hmm.
Matilla as a middle school and being able to offer more options
Mhm.
for kids so they can do so much more.
I think it's great for some kids, and I think it doesn't work for others. I don't think it's great for others. Because my son went into Mupu, and he was just like, you could see that he relaxed, and I mean, he's just not a big, he's not a big,
Marilyn has a
largely
huge smile on her
populated.
face.
Yeah, he's not a largely populated. I mean, since he was a baby, he did not like crowds ever. So he wasn't comfortable. And then when they went down with the 6th graders, after that, because then he was like, I want to go to Matillaha, and then we went down to the 6th graders, and he was like, I don't want to go to Matillaha. It's too big. Matillaha's not even that big. This is my son.
I thought Mupu was an elementary. Is it a K?
K through 8.
Okay.
And I believe, so Briggs is K through 4, I think, in the Olive Lands, and then 5 through 8 in Briggs. And then Santa Clara, I believe, maybe someone else knows better, is K8. K6? K8.
K6.
Not sure. Yeah.
K6.
You know, the thing that strikes me is the one thing we don't have control over is Santa Paula opening and closing its boundaries. And while I view Upper Ojai as part of the greater Ojai Valley, and really as a community part of this community, if all the students are coming from Santa Paula, I mean, it's a thought that I don't want to have, but I can't stop thinking, why wouldn't we just want Summit to be part of the Santa Paula School District? Because that's where the students are coming from, and they're the ones who have control over whether the students are going there.
I believe that did change the boundaries. It has to go through, has to get petitioned and then go through a vote.
Oh, I'm sure.
I think it has to do all
there's
that.
red tape. There's red tape to everything.
I don't know why.
I'm just wondering. You know, in today's configuration, it seems like we're fighting a losing battle in terms of having students from the Ojai Valley and Upper Ojai populate the school. It seems like the only viable way for Summit to function is with students from Santa Paula.
It does seem like that. And I mean, when I drove there, it's actually smack in the middle between, really, I mean, between the boundaries of Ojai and the...
We are up there, we have the Santa Paula address. It's weird.
Ojai Santa Paula Road.
Yeah, it's there.
Yeah, I live on the same road, and it's Ojai Road in Santa Paula.
Well, we're
Not
the
Ojai, Santa Paula.
last house in Ojai.
And right across the street.
And right across the street from the school.
So if you walk past the school, you're in Santa Paula.
Well, it's not the city
it's
of
county.
Santa Paula, but it's the unincorporated
Yes.
area.
Yeah. And actually...
It's just a rhetorical question. Through all the discussion, I mean, it seems, I don't think that made sense 50 years ago, but in today's world, it seems like things have changed significantly demographically.
And just 2 things. So actually, do the drive, 10-minute drive, actually, we were the parents that did the 10-minute drive over to Summit from Santa Paula. I mean, we were them. In fact, it took 15 when they were fixing the roads, so it's 20. And then, as far as getting students from Santa Paula, I know there's been difficulties, but it's brand new superintendent coming in, really good time to make good relations, and I don't know, I mean, I don't know what, for the last 10 years, they've been opening their doors to Mupu, which is a different district, but I don't know why they closed to Ojai, but maybe now's the time to go.
Because we were taking students.
But now with all of these new, I mean, there's so many more students now. There's really, their enrollment is still increasing while Ojai's declining, and I believe you said Ventura was declining also?
I'll tell you why. It's because Mary Ann did such a good job
going down. Well, speaking of which, Marianne.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Barbara.
I'm Marianne Ratcliffe. I was Summit School PTO for many years. My kids started at preschool there. My daughter is a freshman at Nordhoff. Extraordinary experience at Summit. I have more than I can say to you guys tonight, and I have so many responses to what you're saying. I was also on the 7-Eleven committee, and I only learned about this last week. And I called Jim Bailey because of his program that I knew about, and I was astounded. I'm still astounded. Jim has, I didn't know, is 87 for next year.
They don't all come in with
Yeah, I know. They're right next door to Summit School, right next door. And I just went over there to grab my iced tea before I came over to this meeting earlier this afternoon, and Jim showed me around, and I'm blown away. Every single one of you needs to go up there and see what Jim is doing, and what a great synergy to have with Summit School. And what an amazing opportunity to have what Jim is doing to somehow have, like, not supplant it, or maybe if you close it to do that, but just to see. And to have 87 from that far, I've said that's possible. I've said that from day one, and it's been possible for Summit. But then to see it next door, and I just found out next week, I am blown away, you guys. That I'm not going to tell you that it's possible. I'm not going to have these people say, "Oh yeah, please, we could do it." No, it's happening right now. It's been happening yesterday and before, and I just learned about it. So I got to say, Jim is also an amazing educator. We hired him for the OEF. We had to demonstrate that he was worth all of our grant money, and we clocked that he raised our science grades, scores, test scores at Ohio Unified exponentially. This is a top quality educator. He is making it happen right now. Pay attention, because Jim Bailey's going to be eating our lunch, El Camino's going to be eating our lunch, and Valley Oak Charter is already eating our lunch. Let's stop what we're doing right now, and I'm going to just give you the long-term view. I love these parents. Thea Wilcox, I just met her last week. I am blown away. These are people who are new to the district. I have sort of this long-term view. I got way too much to say, you guys, but here in 2011, we knew that 3 teachers is a secret sauce to Summit. You know why? Because our twin school, our exact twin, is Santa Clara Elementary School. So while we're always wanting more kids, they cap it at 52. You want to go and they've got 52 kids? Sorry, you're out of luck, because they have their formula that works, and it's 2.5 teachers. When I took my son to enroll in kindergarten, I called up Mrs. Smith, who is the principal. I said, "How many teachers are there?" She said, "There are 2 teachers for 6th grade." And I said, "Not happening. I am not taking my kid to Summit School." I didn't know anything about it then, even though it's 1.5 miles from my house. Well, you know what? If we get more kids, we can have a 3rd teacher. Great. You know what? That happened, and that was so successful. So let's just go to 2011, and we had an amazing 3 teachers. And then the district, all of a sudden, I get it. You know, we had some terrible financial times. We're going to go down to 2 teachers. I was like, well, that would be terrible. So what did we do? We just knocked on Mupu's door. We knocked on Santa Paula's door, and we knocked on Briggs' door. And you know how many kids we had from April and May, which is, I think we found out, to August, to the opening day of school? We had 24 at least more kids. It's somewhere 20 plus. We'll just say 20 plus. That was a hard nut to crack with Hank, because you know what a high bar he set. But when the Ojai Valley News wrote the article, Summit PTO attracts new students, keeps teachers, this is what our superintendent said. He said, the solution, which was having the 3 teachers and all those kids, is actually making us money. Bangs are enthused. It's the only school in the district that really had an opportunity like this. Well, guess what? It's still the only school in the district. Maybe others as well, but it has the opportunity because exactly what Barb was saying, and because now Santa Paula is opening its borders. Hello, That's what made it work in 2011-12. It's here. It's already been done.
Marianne, the last comment.
Yeah.
Are you saying that prospectively Santa Paula is opening its borders?
No, Andy already verified it today.
Okay.
To Mupu, I haven't spoken to San Paul directly.
And Mupu is already full, and one of my great friends is a secretary there for years. She's had postcards, and she said we've gotten kids from the overflow from Mupu.
Clarification. My understanding is that you could always make an inter-district transfer if you meet that
That's
January
correct. District
deadline,
of choice, correct.
That's the district, right? And the discretionary
That's right.
opportunity is available because someone didn't make that deadline.
It's really hard, and nobody knows about it, and it's not advertised. Okay, so
Can I ask one question of Andy? Is it possible to close for Santa Paula to say yes to Mupu and no to us? I thought it was open or it was closed.
Are they able to?
it closed to everybody.
Well, yeah, when they closed initially, they closed to everybody. I don't know. I'll have to get back to you on whether or not they. I mean, unfortunately, they are currently in that, as we heard
I
from
know
Barbara
it's a- I
earlier.
know
we have
they
Ed
won't.
coming on
They
July
didn't.
1, and so it's challenging to reach out to Christine in her current interim role. But I can see where they currently are with our district.
I thought legally if they open to one, they have to open
They
to
didn't.
all.
They
That's
didn't
not
open
the
it to
case.
everybody, just like they didn't open
They
it to
always
Ojai.
have discretion to deny a request if it doesn't meet the grounds they're looking for. So when I was talking to, I've heard that there have been denials in the past when someone made a request to Mupu and they were making the statement that they were requesting Mupu because they were seeking a smaller class size. And the reality is that Mupu starts off at 20 because they want people to then combine to 40 as the students age up. So they actually have combination classes for all their upper grades, and they go up to upwards of 40. And so the school did decline. San Paula apparently declined that request because they said, well, that's not actually a valid reason to say that you're trying to go to a school that has larger class sizes than ours. So they certainly have the ability to decline on an individual basis. To have a just blanket policy of saying that we would not approve Ojai Unified, I would need a legal opinion.
Can I just say that Mupu also feeds into Santa Paula High School? So
Right, exactly. They certainly, they know that they're going to return, those students will likely return to them at some point. That's right.
Marianne.
There is a playbook. It's already been done. We have a bigger than life playbook right next door to us. And I do want to go to what Thea said. 6 months ago, the largest wildfire in modern California history devastated Upper Ojai. I can't say it better than what Thea said. 3 of our Summit School families have lost their homes. Some of them are here tonight. One was forced to leave her home because of the lingering burning seeps. And now Unified School District is saying it has few options but to pull the plug and close our 107-year-old school that is the hub of our community. But that is far from the only option, and I see such a clear path. In fact, I see several clear paths. Over 6 school years, Summit Interdistrict enrollment alone has brought to the district more than $1 million, which I have carefully documented. So there is a portion of that money that would go to educate the interdistrict students that we bring in. Granted, but I guarantee you it's not $1 million, and it's not even close to $1 million that Ojai Unified has spent on those extra handful of interdistrict kids. So I'm speaking to you now, to the Federation teacher president. Summit School benefits the entire Ojai Unified School District, and the reason I care, if you want to close Summit, go for it. There are so many great opportunities for that school. We see it right next door to us. Do it. But you're hurting the school district. My daughter is a freshman at Nordhoff High School. Those resources could be used for Nordhoff and for Mertilha and for these other elementary schools for higher teacher salaries. I've done the numbers. Yeah, $1 million+ minus a certain amount of money that it goes to educate those interdistrict kids, but not nearly the number that we get from interdistrict transfers. And don't talk about necessary small schools. When Andy was giving us the numbers For the 7-Eleven committee, he was telling us, some years you're going to get NSS, and some years the LCFF is going to be higher. And guess what? This is one of those years where the local control funding formula, we get more money. And Title I, we never had Title I. How long have we had Title I? 1 or 2 years? Yeah, just this year. So that's an extra bonus, not to mention the supplemental grant of $1,300 some for a sizable proportion of our students, right? The supplemental grant.
For the low-income students, unduplicated count.
Could we take a moment? Could you speak to this issue of the years when LCFF is greater versus the, can you talk a little bit about the impact of the necessary small schools?
Sure. So, forgive me, you may not be able to see, but the funding formula for necessary small schools is kind of a stepped model. So you get a grouping of funding, 150,000 plus for every 24 students. So it doesn't matter if you have 24 or if you had 5, so long as you meet all the other parameters, you would get that grouping of funding. Obviously, if you had 5 students, then that grouping is far better. If you overlay it with LCFF, that's a per student funding model where every single additional student you get a little bit more money. It actually kind of looks like this. So you have points, if anyone's able to see it, or at least the board is able to. You have points where LCFF will actually generate more dollars than necessary small schools would. So, for instance,
because necessary small schools comes in chunks.
Exactly. So let's go to an extreme example. If we had 24 students, LCFF would generate more money than sticking in the necessary small school funding formula. Still wouldn't be sufficient to actually cover the cost of the 2 staff, and necessary small schools would only be funding for 1 staff member as well. But that would be a better revenue stream, LCFF, and so we'd say, thank you, state, but we will decline the NSS allowance this year and instead just collect the regular ADA on them. Does that make sense?
But 25 students then.
Well, it's actually ADA, so it's not the enrolled students, but rather that we have at least 24.5 ADA. We do have a pretty significant chronic absenteeism issue at Summit. And so whereas district-wide, it's safe to say normally it's about a 95% factor for ADA to enrollment, at Summit it's actually a little bit below a 90% factor. So you really would need at least 28 kids, 29 kids to meet the ADA threshold. But then you also would be in a perilous position if a single student were to exit during the year, or have a prolonged illness or something like that. So 30 is really the bare minimum to qualify for that necessary small school next step up.
But this current enrollment, the NSS even is not even available.
Correct. That's correct. Right. We fail.
Is the only funding.
But it would
That's
be
correct.
less. But
That's
it would be
correct.
less. We don't want necessarily small schools because we could choose any year that it would be lower. We wouldn't have it, so we wouldn't even choose to have it this year because it's lower than what the LCFF funding is.
You just brought something up that I didn't know. What you said there's more absenteeism up in Summit?
That's right. Marilyn, do you want to
Yeah.
speak a little to that?
In 16-17, the district chronic absentee, meaning absent 10% of the school year. So
18 days.
The district percent was 11 and Summit's was 18.
Any idea why?
The fire.
No, that was for a prior year.
Just to be clear, we're talking about the prior year, not the fire year.
No, 16-17.
This is 16-17, it's not the fire.
Correct.
Which is interesting when you get back to chronic absenteeism also affecting the school.
Well, there was the road, how long was the road chewed up for? I don't know if you guys ever go through there when the road's that was months. Stoplights, 15-minute wait, 20-minute wait.
So maybe the inter-districts coming in?
You had to come all the way around.
Do we, could it be that? I mean,
Is there a
Some of it, I'm
statistical
sure,
skew
has to be.
because of the lower number of students? It's a bigger percentage?
Certainly, a smaller sample size does lend itself to having greater, greater skew from the mean from just a few students.
Marianne.
All right, just to speak to.
Marianne, though, I mean,
I'm
we're
gonna keep it
letting this
short.
go way longer than
I'm going to speak
anyone
just
else.
for
but-
volunteers. Well,
Yeah.
an hour at a time.
Yeah.
Volunteers and aides. Summit School has spent tens of thousands of dollars on aides. Tens of thousands of dollars. Forget volunteers. We pay a salary from the PTO that we bust our butts for. when the 7-Eleven committee looked at what it would cost, what the school district would save by closing Summit, it would save $14,958 when you do all the math. And guess what? You're going to lose a heck of a lot more money by closing it because of all of the opportunity costs that you've foregone. I
think that might be a lot of your statistics and stuff we did hear through the 7-Eleven, and I would like to have a kind of put a
those came from Andy. Those figures came from Andy, and then he had the figure that counted in the principal's halftime cost. The principal would still be
No, I just mean in general. I know you said you did a lot.
Yeah,
of
and I have it straight from Andy because Andy was amazing during the 7-Eleven
just to also
committee.
clarify, Marion, we were talking about a different reality. And 2 years ago, when we had 45 students, and the savings or the financial
but just
side
the
of things
straight up
compared to-
closure was $14,958
Well,
without the
that was
opportunity
because we
cost.
assumed what the cost would be to move those 45 students to another site and still educate and provide full services to them.
I've got your handout, and I'll show it to you. And I don't like to contradict you, Andy, because you are the man. We got a lawyer, we got an MBA, and we got a school superintendent here.
Well, thank you.
And what you did for that 7-Eleven committee was amazing, and that's what I worked from. The state recognizes the need for necessary small schools. That's why we have a necessary small schools grant. They're necessary small schools in geographically remote areas. That's what Upper Ojai is. Parents have long encouraged the idea of creating a magnet school. We can call it a hybrid magnet. We can call it a focused area of study. That has not happened. Summit families have long supported the idea of creating a charter school should the district choose to dispose of Summit. And although we are prepared today to create a charter, we have been reluctant to do so because it takes resources from a district already struggling with declining enrollment. A district in which Summit parents will continue to attend through Matilaha and Nordhoff. There are many reasons why Summit cannot be a magnet school. There are so many reasons why we cannot take advantage of burgeoning opportunities for an independent study school model. There are so many reasons why Summit cannot attract the neighborhood school students who go to school in Ojai. There are so many students why we cannot attract students from Santa Paula, etc., etc., etc. But guess what? Mr. Bailey is making it happen right next door. Summit families know the path to bring in more students. And we have great news confirmed by Andy that Santa Paula Unified School District is releasing students. That Mupu School down the road, which we've already heard is almost full, that Briggs and Santa Clara Elementary are happy to refer their overflow out of district students to Summit. So here's what I hope you'll consider. One, you keep Summit open for a bridge year with the students you have. In the meantime, we use our playbook. Such an easy playbook, guys. It's such a simple fix. The parents, in the meantime, so yeah, you say, oh, Thea, you know what? You are right. You are speaking to what is right for our community. But guess what? In the meantime, all of us parents who have made this, who've done this successfully, we work with the community as we have successfully in the past, and you have more than 19 kids when you start in 2018 and 19 at Summit. The district explores synergies with Rock Tree Sky. We incorporate some of the other great ideas that I haven't even thought about. You guys might not have thought about them yet, that you'll hear tonight. And Summit School will thrive with or without the Ojai Unified School District. And so for the sake of the entire district, and I really like you guys, I want the best for Ojai. For the sake of this entire district, forget Summit, close it if you want, but for the sake of the district, it is my hope that short-sightedness does not rule the day, that you will be as inspired as I am by the possibilities, not just for Summit School, but for this entire school district. And I am so happy to be having this conversation, and I thank you for it. And I thank you for all of your amazing ideas.
Thank you, Marianne.
Well, one thing and Marianne and I are friends, and we've spoken a lot about this issue together. Hopefully, one of the hard things about being in an environment like this and being on a board is I've been on that side and looked at that guy, and I look like that guy, and I think it's easy for you to perceive us as these people, these idiots that don't see the obvious, and all I can say is I spend, I'm a volunteer. I do this as a 100% volunteer. I get nothing from this, other than that I love our schools, I love public school, and I love the Ojai public schools. And I know a lot of people throughout our whole school district that do a lot of work at all these different schools. And it's important in any environment like this to recognize that there are people at Topa Topa and Miramani and Miners Oaks who don't want their kid to be in a 33 student class. And that's also an issue. And we sit up here, and what I'll tell you what I do know, and Marianne, you said, you know, the playbook. I know that it takes a driver or drivers to get things done like you're advocating. I know that we had a 9/11 committee that came perilously close to closing a elementary school. But here we are again. You say here we are again as if it's my job to have done something in the interim. My plate is full of dealing with district stuff, and so it's just so you know, it is a short-sheeted bed, as they say. The resources are limited, and we have tons of need. So this conversation is important. No decision has been made, but I do want you to know that when you look at us, and I hear every now and then this edge in your voices, like we're up here playing some kind of mastermind over the scenario. We're not. We're all just trying our best to deal with what we have, and there is nothing, and I totally, personally will, and each person here can speak for themselves, but the fire is a huge part of our deliberations on this stuff. It cannot not be. Chris Danch, sorry. I had to blow one.
Might as well be me, right? Got thick skin. I'm Chris Danch. I'm speaking just as an individual, but I also was a member of the 7-Eleven committee that last convened and looked at this issue at some length. I don't necessarily speak for that committee, obviously, in this thing, and also I was one of the distinct minority on that, in what I voted for on that committee. Most of which was received very poorly by the crowds that showed up. So, but I want to remind the district that in those deliberations, that two very important things were on the table in terms of Summit School, and that was that it was large enough to be viable as a school and provide the kind of quality education that is required by the state and expected by the community. And secondly, that it was a net revenue generator through the small school funding formula. And then on top of that, everybody recognized it was an important asset to the community. Every school is an important asset to the community. So that links everybody. From the 300 plus people I'll listen to for 2 very long nights yelling at us up there, I know you're going to get the emotion every time you do something. It's unavoidable. So that cannot rule the deliberations that you have to make, because you have the district as a whole to attend to, you have the financial fiduciary responsibilities, and you're going to get that. Somebody is going to be very unhappy when you do anything. That's just part of the deal. So here we have the school no longer has the 2 things that's needed. We can go on all night about why it's declined and what can be done to save it. But right now you don't have a viable school for this coming school year. And I think the decision should be pretty clear to do it. Now, the question is what to do thereafter. I agree with you. It takes drivers, it takes outside funding to get something started, like all these fine suggestions that I've heard, and I have my own ideas to do. Work hard on some of those ideas as a volunteer. But those take time, so maybe an idea would be, just to throw it out there, is I see a loss of $150,000 to keep it open for next year at the current enrollment that we have. Assuming that's a reasonably accurate number, I'm sure it is. Why doesn't that, if you're going to lose the money, spend it on examining, through some kind of paid driver or drivers to look at maybe which of these ideas can actually bear fruit in the context of a public school district in this area for Ojai Unified. Let's take a look at this, at these ideas. People talk and talk and talk, and I'm not, Jim, I'm sure your operation's fine with that. To me, it's apples and oranges in terms of districts. What you can and can't do. You can't compare those two things and say you should be doing this. So let's take a hard look at what can be done to, if anything, to stop this, to do something about this declining enrollment, but to continue and take that money, which in a district that is as tight as is, we talked about this in the 7-11, that $150K is an important margin. It makes a big difference at the margin when you're this close.
$150K though, Chris.
I'm taking the number that was put on the memo. I'm not here to question that. Whatever that number is. But that number, if it is in that range, that's an important, that margin makes a difference. So let's do something about it that looks at the district as a whole and what can be done. And if nothing can be done, then we continue to make the hard choices of limiting the number of schools we have that can be run viably. And I'm not here to disregard people's cares and their emotions and their needs, and I understand the trauma of the fire, but this is something where we've all known this is inevitable. And so here we have a situation where you have a school that's not even have enough students. And I find it telling that a person who wants that school to remain open took her kids out. I understand she needs clarity, but you took them out. So it's like, I want you guys to do this, but I'm not going to stick around while you do it.
Bring them back if it stays open.
Okay, I withdraw that point. What you do have, you have a school right now enrollment that's going down and it's no longer viable. And so maybe the idea, and I think in keeping it open, takes away any kind of resources you may have to investigate whether it can ever be reopened and under what conditions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
I don't want to close the public meeting unless everyone who wants to be heard has been heard. Some of you may be sitting there wondering if I want to get up and speak. If you'd like to do so, please come forward.
I have a question. Just how long is?
Sorry, can I have your name first?
Cass. I'm sorry, Cass Boyson. I have 6 kids. 3 of them were at Summit. How long has the student numbers been an issue? How many years has it been? And I understand it's probably been declining gradually, but how long has it been a serious problem over the 100 and something years? Is this just recently, or has it been like this for 40 years? That you guys just been a thorn in your side? I was just curious.
The enrollment's never been what we're looking to for next year. So the past 5 years, we were hovering around 40. Before that, we saw a few years in the 60s and going all the way up to 70, and I'll have to rely on some of our historians who know the school previously. But there is while it may not seem like a dozen kids, 20 kids is that big of a difference, there is and that's I hope what's been conveyed tonight. The scenario of 18 kids is definitely different than 45. So if the question is when does it come into this scenario, it's only this coming year. When has it been this overall smaller school? Again, when I spoke to Carol, I was very surprised to hear that there was a point in which there was over 100 students there. I was not aware of that, but
When
Marilyn.
Jack and I first moved here, I think it was 1970. I think I wrote these things down. It was 1970, and we've had a long connection with Summit because Larry Hartman was the principal, Roz De Maria was the office manager, and there were 4 classes. So I don't know, 4 classes of 20, 25, something like that. So it was fairly what I might call robust. They probably were combination classes, but it just has sort of steadily declined. When I was principal 2005, I think we had 68 or something like that, and we had 2.6 FTE because one of our teachers taught KN1, and so then she left and did something else at another site, and then the first graders went in with the 2-3 class, so it was 2.6. Something like that. So it's just sort of in answer to Cass's question, I think steadily declined. But in the 70s, it was, pretty consistent. I looked back at the yearbooks, pretty consistent with 4 classes.
There was about 198 when we started.
Mm-hmm. What year was that, Kim?
198.
Yeah.
198 kids up there?
No, there was about
100 in 1998.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
Cass, do you want to be heard?
No. I'm sorry, I was
Do we
talking.
have to stand up there?
No.
I don't think anybody's saying, can we have one more year and then shut our schools down? And think everybody is saying, can we have one more year, give us a little piece, a break for a second, give us a chance to do something different, let us have our home back, and don't threaten us every single year with this. It's torture.
I think you'd have a whole, there's no way around it. I understand what you guys have to do. You have to have these meetings because the pressure's on you. But I think a lot of people would be, or more people would be signing up if they didn't think it would be closed next year because that's the buzz.
That's for sure.
You know, that's the chatter going around.
Except that the number was 24 before Andy had any conversation.
Well, you already talked about, Andy already talked about the fluctuation. That's not saying that it can't go up.
This is, I don't know if you guys spend any time in Upper Ojai or maybe if you guys came and donated at the relief station at the summit actually. A lot of people did. I mean, everybody, Ojai is going through a complete change right now. It's the farmers are out. Ojai is different. It's completely different than it was 15 years ago. There are so many kids, and everybody has a baby hanging on them. And everybody I know has kids, and I'm 50, almost 50. I'm not 20 years old where all my buddies are having kids. I mean, everybody up there has kids nowadays. It's changing. Younger people moving in.
A friend up there that lost their house, but they'll stay. She has 3 little kids coming into the school district that are willing to stay here if you guys keep the school open. Nobody wants to not be able to walk their kid across the street. And they're out of the state if you guys don't keep the school open. And they have 3 coming in that she will sign up tomorrow.
And the Boysons lost their home in the fire.
James, just to let you know that you're right, the enrollment was 24 before Andy ever had the meeting, but what they're kind of speaking to you about, which is new to me because I'm actually new to Upper Ojai, is that most every year it's been this, are we gonna have enough teachers? How are we gonna pay for the aides? PTO has to come up with 10 grand so our kids get what we need. So this has been what's happening every year. People, enough is enough, people leave. Who wants to do that?
That's the first thing we heard when we came here.
That's what kind of he's talking about.
Back on the chopping block again, our first year when Shane was in kindergarten. On the chopping block.
To be clear though, to be clear, Summit hasn't been on the chopping block, but for the 7-Eleven committee, when we looked at the whole question of what to do with the elementary school, and I'm not going to say it's on the chopping block, but in this discussion we're having today. So, and talking about those resources you're talking about, scrambling, talk to somebody at Topa, talk to somebody at Miramani, talk to somebody at Miners Oaks. They're doing the same thing. They're scrambling to maintain art. They're scrambling to maintain music. They are scrambling to get people into classrooms.
On your hands.
We do.
It doesn't minimize our situation whatsoever. And just because, and also when you're speaking to how people kind of have an edge in their voice, and even this gentleman, I'm so sorry, I can't remember your name, saying the emotions. Chris, I really liked what you had to say, actually. People are emotional. It's their school. They're going to care.
I understand perfectly.
Yeah, it's not against you personally. It's more against Andy, no offense to you personally, but the actual administration that gets paid to do something.
Right.
To come up with the board. Hey, board, this is what we think you should do.
And Chris and I
have
spent
meetings
hours
and do
doing
something.
this, all of these recommendations. Chris voted on these, by the way, all the things that the school district could do to assist.
I think it's
They're right
important that you close the public meetings.
Okay. It's okay. I mean, I'm okay with it, but you're not.
I'm not.
Any other board member want to close the public meeting?
I'm making a motion to close the public hearing.
I'm not ready to do it yet. Anyone else?
I would like to know if it looks like somebody else has something. As long as somebody has something.
And Andy was just going to say something.
Well, for me, while I look at I feel like you and I too have a responsibility to look at the district as a whole. As much as I want to look at Topa as its own school, I don't get that. That's where I teach, is at Topa, and I want to do that, right? But I can't because we're Ojai Unified School District, and so
what happens at Summit, what happens at TOPA, what happens everywhere affects everyone else. So it's, so what I look at, and I like to be innovative. I like to think of all the possibilities that's the way I work in my life. But I look at Summit and I ask myself, how can you have 24 kids? So how can you justify one teacher working there or two teachers teaching there for 24 students when I have 24 kids in my class alone? And so that's difficult for
Because you're
me.
probably only teaching one grade.
Yes, and your district is also getting money because Kate said to me straight up, $300 and some $1,000 you're getting for necessary small schools, that's not all going to Summit, Marina. You realize that, right? And it doesn't.
$50,000 for a year.
Okay, my fellow board members feel like this is getting out of control a little bit, but I saw somebody in the back who wanted to speak. Ma'am?
Well, I really want to let you know, like, if Summit close, I'm going to lose like my 3-hour job. I'm the custodian. And besides that, I'm losing already 1 hour because they cut me 1 hour. And I'm losing my benefits already. Like starting tomorrow, I don't have no health insurance. And if you Summit close, I'm not gonna have like $700 less than my paycheck. That's it.
Thank you. I'd like to learn more about your situation, but we'll do that offline. Okay.
Is there still a question about these multi-grade classes? That's still an issue. I know we talked about that in 2016. That seemed like a big one. That not a lot of people seem to believe in that, if it works or not. It was a question of if it works or if it could work.
Mrs. Usher came to our 7-Eleven community and said that it was ideal.
Absolutely. I mean, having 6 kids, I can tell you.
I came from San Antonio School, and I was not willing to go to Summit School because it was small and there was only 2 teachers. And I was having a hard time getting all my kids back and forth, the car breaks down, whatever happens. And one of the women that work at San Antonio said, why don't you just go look at Summit? And I said, nah. And then I thought, I'll stop by there on the way home. I spent probably 3 hours there talking to every single kid. I called the principal the second I got home. I said, sign me up. It's not a problem. It works. They take care of it. It's a family. They take care of each other. It doesn't matter. They love that the 6th graders get to take care of the kindergartners. They mentor each other. They help each other in the garden. Like, it just works.
With that positive note, I'm going to move to close the public meeting or the public comments.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks everyone for your input.
Thanks for taking it.
We're still going to talk among ourselves, but you can all leave.
Yeah, so to be clear, the meeting's not over at this time. That was just the actual public hearing portion of the meeting, and so now the board has an opportunity to further discuss.
We're not holding you captive, though. I want to make that clear for those watching at home, especially the police.
So, I mean, does any other board member have anything they want to say at this moment, or should we talk a little about logistics?
I would like to comment on Chris's comment. If you are going to talk, though, I would ask that you step out because we're recording, so people can't hear. I think Jim's program sounds beautiful and delightful, and I know you're an excellent teacher. My kids had you for 5th grade science. But those 87 students are homeschooled. We have over 87 students homeschooled in our district through our charter school. I think the apples and oranges is absolutely correct. Someone who's homeschooled who will drive from Thousand Oaks for 2 afternoons a week isn't any different than somebody in Ojai driving down for ballet in Ventura. It's a very different animal than 5 days a week of a school. And I I don't feel like there's some magic thing that we can do at Summit that's going to suddenly bring 25 students to Summit. Besides those who live there, the growth in Santa Paula. Sorry, we're closed, Marianne.
It's not that many kids.
So,
Guys, though, we have to, this part is when we talk among ourselves. And again, tonight we take no action. It's all just information. You may, and by the way, you may hear something one of us says. You can always send us an email too. There's lots of ways to communicate with us, but we have to, do some kind of an order here. So this is the part we talk among ourselves.
Is this, we're an audience?
Yes,
Okay, I didn't know.
if you want to be, or
No,
yeah.
sure, absolutely, thank you.
But if there's incorrect information, we'd like to have a chance to correct it.
Okay, I mean, I would ask you not do that as we speak and.
I'll just raise my hand if I hear something incorrect, I won't speak.
Okay.
Well, I think it's worth noting that if we do decide to take any action, we would have another meeting to do that, and there would be an opportunity to speak at that other meeting.
Would it be a meeting telling us that you're shutting it down, or just give us, maybe talk about more possibilities of some ideas that you guys may have, or if it's just us to keep it open? I'm not sure what you guys do other than.
It would be, you'd see on the agenda what it was we were going to vote on, and therefore you would know what it was, whether it was, closing the school for a year or other things. There might be multiple options, but the public would know about it, and it has to be given well in advance, and you would have an opportunity to talk. The only difference is, like I said tonight, there's no possibility of any vote because tonight's an informational meeting.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'm gonna say one more thing and I'm done.
Okay.
So the next meeting is not a meeting. It's just you're telling us what you're gonna do.
No, it's also a meeting, just like this. Everyone
and
can.
also, there's a possibility of 2 or 3 scenarios, and you would have to have a motion for someone. Does anyone move to keep San Antonio or Summit open and do the da-da-da? Does anybody move to do the other things, but there'll be discussion around?
Speaking of which, Jane, you tantalized me earlier when you said you had an idea for other options. What, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, and I heard things tonight that influenced my feelings and my thinking, but having experienced the comments from Summit and San Antonio and Miners Oaks 2 years ago, I was struck at the time by how similar, like the parents at Miners Oaks and the parents at San Antonio and the parents were all saying the same thing about their school. And so I thought, it's a shame we don't have a way to show people at Summit, like go spend a day with your kids at San Antonio and then come to me and say, I don't like San Antonio because, like somebody who's already been there, maybe that's helpful. Somebody who could say, here's what was different and here's why I like Summit better. But to just say, we like our small school, it's like a family, that's what I hear from San Antonio. But it's a small school, we have a family, and to hear that Summit used to be 100 students, so sometimes San Antonio is 130. So there are a lot of things that you've got in our district at Miners Oaks, at even some of the families from Topa say the same thing because they've come from districts where there's 1,000 students in the elementary. But I think it's important if you're going, and we don't know yet, but if we're going to make a decision that's going to affect these families, that they have the opportunity to see something exciting at San Antonio, just like the opportunity for coming up with these ideas that would draw Santa Paula students. There's something exciting going on there, let's see, right? But I think the big issue that parents have, besides the smallness, is the time of day that San Antonio starts. So I would say, would we look at an option where we start school later at San Antonio so that the parents at Summit who normally bring their kids to 8 bring it at 8 o'clock and they get on the bus and come down the hill? Now, if I was a parent at San Antonio, I'm like, no, I love my start time. But I would also say, but my school's staying open and we're trying to be open arms to these 24 students who are losing their school. I might consider it. Does the district consider, then we'll have free before the day, what do you, I don't know what it's called, preschool, but, daycare from 7:30 to 8 o'clock for those families who need that early start time at San Antonio. I just think there are another option or two that is not necessarily, or another scenario. If you, for me, the big thing that worries me is the academics. And I know Sherry spoke on it 2 years ago. I disagree with her. 2 years ago, she seems to be, from her letter, agreeing more now, and from the letter, it's because of the number. She felt that way, that teaching 4 grades was fine when there was 20 students in her class, but when there's only 10, she doesn't feel it's a good academic program anymore. And for me, that's also got to be a very important focus, is the academics. Our students coming to Matilaha or going to wherever they go as prepared as a student who comes out of one of our other schools. And I don't feel that this scenario is going to produce students who are prepared. And that's a bigger concern for me. If I was a parent, that would be, and I think that's what's happening. I don't know that parents are, I know some of the parents whose kids came down the hill 2 years ago in 6th grade, and they ended up bringing their 3rd graders and their 4th graders and saying, this is a lovely school. And I'm concerned about the multiple classrooms that my child's in at Summit. So for me, your appeal for this fire and the change has more impact in my consideration than anything else, because my focus has been on academics and on the child, not on the size or the number of teachers or the family feel. I think all those things, it has all those things, and all those things are important. But I want to make sure that we're providing the best for those students, because they don't have another option. They don't have another year to learn 3rd grade. This is their only chance to learn that curriculum. And the curriculum is so rich. And the 3rd grade curriculum at the schools who are doing the Chumash, and it's so rich. And I don't know how a teacher provides that richness when they're also doing Egypt Day, and they're also doing the 50 states for 5th graders. Those are things that can be, if a child is, as a parent, I can help my kids love something. I can help them be excited about something. Or I can say, oh, it's going to be awful, and this is, even if I'm feeling that, I'm trying not to let my child know that. And I think it's important that if that becomes a road that we take, that parents should feel good. Parents should have the opportunity to feel good about it. So how do we provide that to parents? How do we show parents that if we make this decision, here's why we're making it, but here's what we hope you can come see. Before you go to Mupu, before you change your mind, come down the hill. Come look at San Antonio. Come tell us what, if Summit's not an option, what could we do to make you want to stay in Ohio Unified? What positive, it's just like when your child goes from elementary to Matilla and you think, oh, I wish that was a K through 8. And then once they're there, you're like, oh, this is kind of nice, They really like going to these different teachers. And I think it's important that whatever our decision is, well, not whatever it is, but if the decision is that it's not a viable school because of the academics, and I guess because of the financial situation, then it can't just be, oh, that's what we're doing. It has to be thoughtful, and which I think we need to try to help make it the best situation. It's a bad situation. There's nothing you can do to change that. But is there a way, can we look at a way to make it less bad or more inviting?
I have a couple comments on what you said. I love the romantic idea of a one-room schoolhouse out in the Old West, and but to me, a lot of that is what is the educational goal. If it's to learn to read and write and to do enough math so you don't get cheated when you sow your corn, then you can do that. If it's to learn what you need to do to move to the next grades and get into college in a modern world in 2018, I think those goals are different than they were. That's one thought I had. The other thought I have is I think that there's an argument in terms of trying to convince Upper Ojai residents to bring their kids down to San Antonio. I think it's a totally different kind of argument to try to talk people who live in Santa Paula into driving all the way up the hill and then down the hill to San Antonio. I don't know how we make that argument.
Unless that's what I was talking about, if they still just drive to San Antonio at the same time of day. But the daytime, we bus the students down.
Right, but that's a lot of time traveling for a student. It just concerns me. I mean, if somebody wants to do that, that's fine. I'm all for it, but I just don't see that as a reality. I think I've said before, I like the idea of having Summit there. I think it serves a role in the community. I think there's an important place for it. I think what we're dealing with, and the question I asked before, is how small is too small? There's been talk that the magic number is 2.5 teachers or 3 teachers. That correlates to a certain number of students being there. And if we can't get that number of students to be there to support the 2.5 or 3 teachers, then maybe that's too small. And if that's too small, then what do we do about it? Our approach for the last several years has been, what we do about it is try to get the parents to bring in more kids so that we can maintain it. And it's one of those things, trying to fill up a sieve with water. It keeps flowing through, and we're always in a situation where we don't have quite enough students to make it work. And so we, on the one hand, I get the sentiment that it feels like we're always having this conversation, but I think Kevin's right. I mean, we've only officially had this conversation twice. What I'm sharing are more thoughts because the reason for tonight's meeting was to hear from all of you. And so we could consider this together and try. I mean, why are we having this meeting? Because a few weeks ago, our administrator saw the numbers come in and everybody was shocked.
Because we have 11 sixth graders who are leaving.
Well, there were a lot of things that they were shocked about, but they were shocked at how low the numbers were. And I think it was brought up before, so what do you do about it? Do you not tell anybody and just hope that the problem goes away, or do you talk about it and try to figure out what the right solution is? And for the last several years, we've been a board who talks about things. And we don't want to hide things, and we want there to be full transparency, and that's why we're here. And that's why we wanted to hear your perspectives. I think we've been pretty open about sharing our perspectives. As we've had this conversation before, at least from my perspective, and I believe from everybody else, there's not been an agenda coming into the meeting. How are we going to, figure out how to do whatever? It's just simply, what are we going to do that's going to be best for the families, best for the kids, mostly best for the kids. frankly. I mean, if I have to choose between what's best for the family and what's best for the kid, I'm probably going to go with what's best for the kid, in my mind. And I might be wrong, but I have 4 kids. They all went to school, you know. We fought with the teachers and the principals all the way through. I think they were tired of us by the time we got through, right? And, you know, it's a challenge for all of us as families going through the schools and trying to figure out how to make it work. And I also want to point out, I agree totally. I'm a huge Jim Bailey fan. I'm sorry he went out, but he's taking care of the baby, right? But I think it is apples and oranges, you know, what they're doing versus what we can do with public education. Although this is probably a good time for me to chip in with my advocacy for trying to do more with online learning in the public schools. Yeah, I mean, this is really tough. I mean, you look at the numbers, and if 18 is the number, if 24 is the number, whatever that number is, and those numbers change. I mean, the one thing I can guarantee is in August those numbers will be different. Will they be bigger, smaller? I don't know. But I think we have cause for concern. And what's going to be the best thing for stability? I mean, I know what I'm hearing is the best thing for stability right now after the fire. And I have to concede that the fire didn't burn right up to our driveway, or it didn't burn our house down. But when I saw the fire coming down the hills and the firemen chased us out of our house, it was a very real concern that we might not ever come back to our house again. And I think most of us in this area went through that experience. But is the best thing going to be to limp through another year and hope things get better, or is it going to be to provide maybe an even more supportive environment for those kids in another school? I don't know the answer to that. I really don't. But those are the thoughts that are going through my head.
Really?
I have questions. I was surprised to hear that Title I, that this is the first year that.
Yeah, you have to have 40% free and reduced lunch for 2 years in a row to get school-wide program.
Mm-hmm.
And so we finally had 2 years in a row of 40% or more. So this was the first year. We had $10,000 of Title I funds because it's based on a per pupil allocation.
And necessary small schools versus LCFF has gone back and forth as to which funding source we're drawing from.
No, since we've qualified for NSS, which the first time was in 15-16, the last factor that was required to be met was our overall size of our district had dipped below 2,500 that year, and since then we've remained in NSS until this upcoming year.
So 2 years back is when we were at LCFF. Is that what you're saying? 15?
I believe it's 3 years back, but yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And 3 years back, we had Summit at 38 to 42.
Exactly, that's right.
And we're able to maintain that. The funding was enough to maintain the school at that point. Ish?
That's always a challenging question. Certainly this year, the support for the Summit School has exceeded the necessary small school funding for this year. We made a significant increased effort this year with both the 6th grade math support as well as supplementing, even for the individual who the PTO was funding. Actually, that did not sufficiently fund that position, so we supplemented that as well as an additional position, as well as a special ed position. Was it Self-sustaining, no, I don't believe it was self-sustaining financially. Was it close enough to where the district felt it served a valuable role, and that the board and Hank and my predecessors have said that they were wanting to respond to the community need to maintain the school? Yes, but I don't think even before necessary small schools that the funding was truly sufficient to fully meet the needs of the site.
Okay. I understand that necessary small schools funding. I mean, I assume it's about equivalent to a certain number of ADA.
That's correct.
What's the number?
It's right there on the piece of paper.
So the
Can I cheat and ask my friend on the phone, Marianne?
The crossover point ends up being near 21 ADA.
Okay. So over 21, you're losing money. Using
Right, you
the
choose
ADA,
LCFF.
You choose LCF
Precisely.
underneath.
That's right. That's exactly right.
I guess I have a couple of questions. I'm sorry, I don't want to.
I'm sorry, real quickly. Every 21. So for each
Yeah, I get it,
tranche,
yeah.
that'd be 42 ADA in the second tranche.
Right.
That's right.
And you keep getting the 150 each
Exactly
tranche.
right. That's exactly right.
Do we have any kind of percentage of what Santa Paula students stay with Ojai Unified after elementary school at summer?
So of the 21 students who have matriculated out of the 6th grade at Summit since 2011-12, we have 4 who continue to be in the district today. Or to be enrolled in the district for next year, I should say. I'm sorry.
And how many since 2011?
That's the number I just said. So since 2011, we've had 21 inter-districts who have matriculated out of the 6th grade, or who have promoted from 6th grade. Of those 21, 4 will be in the district as of
We
next year.
counted 47 years of matriculation.
We're in a different age. We can't count 47 years. We're talking about what's happening to our district, what the state is supplying to us, what our budget is, what our teachers
From 6th
cost.
grade went to 7th grade and 8th grade, and Andy did the math this afternoon. So he showed that there were 47 kids who have gone beyond Summit, who have gone to 7th and
Marianne, that's not why I showed you. That's not why I showed you. And we can talk about it outside this meeting, but that wasn't.
Yeah, we'll
you're
clarify that
misrepresenting
at
that
the next
conversation. So the statement I made was accurate. I have the information right here on this side of the binder. 21 students have completed 6th grade at Summit as inter-district transfers, and of those 21, there are 4 who will be in the district as of next year. From the grouping from 2011 to 2016-17.
So, I'll speak. You can continue to marinate in thoughts. Things that are coming to my mind are, the first thing that comes to my mind is in terms of the school part of this and not the fire and the other aspects of it, but the school part of it is it's not clear to me as I leave tonight's meeting whether our 2 teachers up there think they could actually, if we were to say, we're gonna give a gap year, so to speak, or whatever the phrase is, we're gonna just continue with 2 teachers and whatever resources we could reasonably devote. And I say reasonably with respect to the other schools as well, whether that's something that, whether they feel that they can actually do their job and actually adequately educate those kids. I also would like more clarity on the economic impact of being open with 19 students. We heard from the classified employee, and I don't know what the whole plan is with that. And then I have to say, it moves me to consider the possibilities for Summit. When we, as even Chris said, and Chris, I know, you kind of alluded a little bit to your other, some of the stuff that you're interested in. I know you're interested in this whole area.
Yeah.
What else could be done to make it an interesting, a different kind of place? But I agree, it's not, and everyone, actually, most of the people advocating for it staying open have used the term traditional school. That's not what Jim Bailey's doing. That's not a traditional school. It's homeschooling. So as a traditional school, is there an opportunity there that could be somehow taken advantage of? It's clearly not going to be taken advantage of this year, I don't think. So, and then like Jane, maybe I think there's an overlay of just thinking about the impact of the fire. I mean, you guys, I just heard you lost your home. I'm really sorry. I mean, I think we all feel, that the upper Ojai, and it so happens that you've got your cohort sitting right here. They're up the other canyon that got brutalized by the fire. So, that's on my mind as well. I mean, it's just hard to count beans only. I mean, not that we would ever want to count beans, but we, it's an interesting thing, the question of the quality of the education, because, we have a job to do to make sure that we're offering the quality education. At the same time, we don't want to overstep into what a parent decides, but we certainly don't want to offer an education and say, well, this isn't just quite up to snuff, but because the parents are cool with it, I guess we are too. I don't think that that's a viable option. So for the next meeting, I'll look forward to having a couple more data points. At least, like I said, hopefully we all appreciate the difficulty those teachers had in coming up here and speaking, because I think that they clearly are torn, and as I'm sure Marilyn is. So anyway, those are my current thoughts.
I think the other thing is, it sounds like there's a desire for a decision.
Yeah, I think we have to have that meeting soon to make it clear whether the summit will be open this coming year or not.
I thought there was potential to put it on the agenda for next week. No? At our regular.
In our agenda meeting, we talked about how we felt like it's such a big decision that it wouldn't give it justice to put it on with other stuff. So we talked about everyone opening their calendars and finding a day if we can do it.
I can see my dad.
And the other part of the next meeting is traditionally we have a whole lot of people here.
Yeah, exactly. So it starts at 4:00. There's a lot of
So, looking at the history of Summit, you can see that the numbers have varied somewhat over time. So I have, my initial concern is this just a temporary dip that we're going to see recover, or is this a permanent change? Right? I mean, is this the new reality, or is this just a temporary variance? And if it were down 10, I might say more easily that it's a variance, but to drop from 40, 60, down to 29, and now down to 14, or even to 24. I'm sorry. What the initial enrollment was. That's a big drop, and it kind of feels like more than just your standard annual fluctuation. And if that's the case, then that has some serious ramifications. There's been a lot of suggestions about things to do with the campus. And a lot of them are like the suggestions of what to do with the downtown property. It takes a sponsor, and it takes money, and it takes something that we don't have right now. But if it is a fluctuation, I kind of think the bridge year would give us time to see that. If there was no recovery, then in my mind, that would be very clear that 2 years in a row of completely unrealistic enrollment is probably a trend, as opposed to a fluctuation. And I do wonder, to touch on something Thane said about technology. right? I mean, right now we have more technology and better technology than ever before for learning. I know we do a lot of distance ed at the colleges. There's some controversy over whether distance distance ed is equally effective, but something versus nothing can, also be a choice. And so I have a couple of things that I'm hoping to hear more about, and that would be one of them, is to what extent could technology potentially leverage the diminished resources that we can afford to put there to create a viable program. The other thing is, if anybody can tell me what's happening in Muhu that's so fabulous, I'd just be curious to know, other than the fact that they're all close to people, to places that are growing, and we're not. We're not growing at all. Between the keeping down the traffic and the water and the property prices, we're not growing. So when I hear, we need to get enrollment, what I'm really hearing is the Ojai Valley is no longer viable. We need to go out and poach other places. And the question that comes up in my mind is, since all of those bodies represent money for the districts that we would be potentially taking them from, why would that happen?
Because they're full.
So that would be one of the questions that I would have. But predominantly, because I'm still stuck on whether this is a fluctuation or a cliff that we've just gone over, is there a cost-effective or a cost-sustainable, let me put it that way, a cost-sustainable way of keeping it open, potentially leveraging technology or some other approach? I have a very hard time seeing 3 teachers there at this point. I don't buy Field of Dreams. Not to mention the fact that the fiduciary responsibility means that, we have to take care of the money and not spend it in hope. And to me, fully staffing Summit with 3 teachers and aides and everybody else in hopes that the enrollment will show up, I don't think is realistic. I do wonder whether or not there's something that could be done to maintain its viability over the year with the enrollment that it has staffed realistically. So that's, and beyond that, I'm stuck. I understand. I mean, we heard all about Summit when the 7-Eleven committees were talking. I understand the emotional connections to neighborhood schools. I did a lot of research at that point in time, and I read a bunch of articles about, it can't just be about the money. The linking and the unifying features of neighborhood schools and the community services and all of that. And that being said, some things aren't always possible. Right? So there's a lot of things that I want in this world, and I don't get many of them. So wanting isn't having, but I just don't know yet. So that would be my question, is that's viability.
Mike, can I add then on to, because in terms of the fluctuation, so if I look at, 43, and I take away 11 for the 6th graders, I'm at 32.
That's correct.
So if you can, next week or whenever, tell us what happened to the 10 students, they lost their home and they've now moved to Tennessee, or can you just?
You want a breakdown of each?
Yeah.
That took us from you can have that.
Why isn't the number next year 32?
Unfortunately, that won't become a public document due to the number of students and families, confidentiality, but it can be something that I can send to you guys for your information. But it won't be part of the board agenda. Sure.
The other thing that I was thinking about is 6th grade. And I don't think it's absolutely necessary that all of our 6th grades move. And so just wondering if retaining 6 at Summit would do anything. For some.
Is there a cost to maintaining a boarded up empty school? If we were to do nothing with it, if we were to close the school and no benefactor came in to make what I hear would be a wonderful community resource So I'm not saying that won't happen, I'm just wondering if there is a cost to the district for just hanging onto a property that's not being used.
It depends on the question. If you're asking about if we're staying in the context of this question, that for 1 year we were going to be looking at a potential temporary closure and looking at future opportunity, the cost for 1 year would be minimal. If we're looking at multi-year, then certainly there do become costs for maintaining a vacant property.
What kind, do you have any idea what that
I'll get a number to you.
potential cost?
For the short term or for the midterm?
Either, or
Okay.
both?
But just to be clear, and we'll discuss this when we get to the logistics of our next meeting, we were agendized for this 1 year, right?
That's correct. That's
As
what
you read the agenda item,
Right.
and it's clear that we're talking about a single school year.
But that's.
But it's a
this
fair question to ask.
Agenda question, I mean, that's just tonight's agenda. The
Correct.
next agenda
Yeah,
could say
someone,
something else.
absolutely, correct.
So,
Yep. I just wanted to be clear where we were at this moment. I mean, I will note that one of the options that was listed included students going down to, into the valley, into San Antonio, et cetera, and that Summit actually, as a location, would be a place for after-school
Right.
care
Mhm.
from 3 to 6, I think. So, I mean, I think, I think certainly you'd expect, especially with everything going up Upper Ojai, now they've got to counsel everything, I would expect that that would be a well-used building regardless of what we do with it.
Agreed.
Anyone have anything else, or you want to go to the question of when and what is what does the item look like when we take a vote on this issue? So why don't we talk about the when part of it first? Because, I mean, Thane and I happen to be the two talking with Andy about our agenda. It doesn't mean that that we carry the day. I mean, if we have a board meeting, coming up, but again, Thane and I thought we should have a separate board meeting for this. And Andy, could you chime in? What were you thinking in terms of, I mean, we're talking about, next week is our board meeting, so we're
That's right.
talking about maybe the next day?
Right, potentially sometime that week, next week, not on the 5th.
And just to remind everyone, next week's meeting starts at 4, and we have a number of presentations.
That's the honoring of, no,
Yeah,
that's an open, well, it's the honoring of the classified and certificate employees of the year. And then
And then a
we
bunch of
start,
retirement
at
stuff.
5:30 is when we start with the retirees. And then we move to a couple of public hearings for budget and LCAP.
4 and not 4:30. When is OEF's thing? Isn't that?
4 o'clock.
4.
Oh,
That-
thank
that's what
you.
this is
That's
all.
what you're saying.
Yeah.
Got
That's
it.
what I'm
Got it,
saying.
got
It
it,
bleeds.
got
That
it.
that actually takes an
Okay.
hour and a half of the honoring of
Right.
recognition of employees.
Well, there may be other conflicts on the 6th. Only one I see at the moment is the Nordhoff Senior Awards Night.
Yeah.
I'm fairly open that week.
How about the 7th?
7th is Miramontes
Miramontes.
Elementary celebration.
I mean, I
And
think
Friday
Jim
is-
is getting something at the Nordhoff thing. So
At the senior awards night?
Yeah, because they also give out,
Pretty impressive.
no, they also give out all the awards for the different.
Sports and
I thought they
I
were
thought
doing
that was last
tomorrow.
night.
Tomorrow night.
It's
Yeah.
tomorrow night.
Oh, they do that tomorrow?
Yeah,
Oh,
that
then never mind. I thought.
Right,
it
right.
was-
No, this is the one where they
Okay.
announce
Just
scholarships.
seniors. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
I was gonna say, that's very impressive that your junior son
Yeah,
has.
so Wednesday works.
Works for me.
6th.
Mm-hmm. Work
I
for you,
can make
Shelley?
it work. I'll move things.
Okay, well, then we'll do that at 6. How about, what is the agenda? What is on the agenda? What are we voting on? I personally would like to vote on the same thing that brought us here tonight, and identical, but as a action item as to whether we suspend classes at Summit for this coming school year.
Yeah, I don't think we can solve all the problems of the world in the next week, but I think there does need to be some sort of plan for this coming year.
Yeah, right away, too.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
Anyone have a different, Shelley, did you want to suggest something different?
I'm wondering, sorry, I was putting it in my calendar. I'm wondering how broad can the agenda item be? Do we have to have the specific motions right there in the agenda? Or can it be the broader question of what will Summit look like in the future?
We want to have an agendized motion which can be altered during the meeting. It can obviously fail for lack of, so either a second motion or a vote in majority. But we do want to make sure that it's clear to families here as well as the entire district that there's an understanding of what the direction of the action is going to be. So that way, again, people, we wouldn't want to have a vote taken in any direction without having the public sufficiently know that that's what's going to be taking place at that meeting and give them the opportunity to speak if they desire.
Well, I'm wondering if the way Kevin said it limits it to just next year or long-term, or does it limit what our motions are?
To be clear, I absolutely intend to limit it to next year. I mean,
Yeah,
I
think
gathered you agreed that we don't really have sufficient information to make a long-term decision.
Yeah, I think it would be fine to talk a little bit about what the ramifications longer term would be about our decision next year. But that we really need to come to a decision for next year. And I'm not certain that I'm willing to make a long-term decision at this point. I'd be willing to, I think we have to make a decision for next year, but I don't think I'm willing to go beyond next year in terms.
I guess my reason for asking that is if we limit it to next year, that limits what the community could do with that property if they were to choose to do something. And I also think that if you close Summit next year, it's going to be a Herculean task to open it. So you really are saying for good. So I don't think it's out of that realm of.
Well, especially if you have Santa Paula and Fillmore, and if those families leave for a year because they're not willing to come down to San Antonio, it's unlikely that they would return the next year. And I think it's important to talk about that. So that might affect our decision to stay open next year, because you're looking at the long term.
Yeah, I agree that that's something we discussed, but I think it's hard to, and I don't think there's any reason to do anything beyond making a decision for this coming year. I mean, even if we felt that there was some need, or someone came to us and said, hey, we've got an idea for doing.
Fire alarm at my school, so. Hello?
Doing something on an extended basis, we could have that board meeting to discuss it. I mean, at this point, the urgent need is to let everyone know what the status of Summit is next year for the school year. Beyond that, I feel like there are many possibilities, and those don't really need to be addressed. Although, like I said, I mean, certainly it's appropriate to bring up the implications of suspending school for a year there and what that might mean.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between responding to a plummet in enrollment and deciding to close the school permanently. I'm not sure that I'm ready to go there, or that, that we've had the right conversations to go there. And yeah, I mean, the other alternatives will all have consequences. There's absolutely no question about it. So.
Perhaps I don't understand. If we close it for a year, we come back next year and have the same conversation over again? Whether we, to
Maybe,
open
but,
it again?
but
Is
things,
that what we're?
okay, so say we close it. If one of the options is used, then it's used as a after-school venue to begin with. So it's not boarded, as you said.
Right.
But in fact is being used. There, all sorts of things could happen in the next year. It could become the venue of some kind of a public center. In the meantime, people could have done some of the things that have been talked about and maybe have gathered more people that are interested in some kind of a different kind of educational environment at Summit. I mean, I don't know the answer, but I know that I certainly don't see any reason to make a definitive.
Sorry, we have a fire alarm going off.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I don't know if you heard that. Jane has to go because there's a fire alarm at the school.
Our business.
We're hoping it's not a fire.
Yeah. So that's why I think we should just make the decision consistent with what was on the agenda tonight, which is the question of, or the decision as to the 2018-2019 school year.
Well, the other point is, I think that we wouldn't have to wait a year to have a follow-up discussion.
I think you shouldn't wait.
Right, that we could have a follow-up discussion in the weeks and months to come. But I think the parents need a decision really before school ends as to what's gonna happen next year.
What is the difference between, it's an elusive thought in my head that I can't quite articulate, but I really feel like if we chose to close it for a year, we're really making more of a long-term, perhaps it's a suggestion rather than decision.
I would agree with you if we were to decide to do that and did nothing else. I would say that would mean, that would put the nail in the coffin. But I don't think that's the only scenario if that decision were made. I'm not necessarily prepared to go there, but were that decision to be made, I would expect that we would spend that time figuring out, if we didn't close it permanently, we retained it for a reason. And so if we retain it, then we should be doing something different moving forward. Because doing the same thing has got us where we are, right? So I would totally agree. If we were to reach a decision to close it down for 1 year, then, our very next conversation needs to be, now what? What do we do when we reopen it to gain viability again? Because just closing it and doing nothing isn't gonna change anything. So, yeah, there's no pretty answer.
Well, the thing that brings up in my mind is, just like you said, what we're doing hasn't worked. So I think we need to decide to do something different, medium and long term. The question is, do we keep it open and figure out what to do, or do we temporarily close it down and figure out what to do? But there's no question that we need to do something differently, because here we are. I don't think any of us really want to be here, right? And so we need to put ourselves in a different position somehow.
So, I would like to, a couple of things. One, I think in fairness, the agenda item that brought us here and that gave rise to the conversation tonight, I think in fairness should be the agenda item we vote on. That is in terms of the limited time frame. But also, like I said, I mean, there's no reason why issues like you're raising shouldn't be brought up as part of the discussion about whether to close it for a year, but I don't think it changes the agenda item. I think it's premature. Whoever said that, I just don't even feel like I could begin to answer the longer term question. And like I said, I don't take for granted any outcome of any of this, whether we were to decide to suspend it or not. I don't take that for granted, and if it were to happen, what would happen then? I don't assume anything.
I guess the place I'm coming from is I think I would have a different opinion of what to do, what my vote would be based on what we were visioning long term. That I would have a hard time not granting a bridge year if we really thought something was viable. But if we really thought nothing was going to be viable, then a bridge year makes no sense. And we need to change gears now.
And that's the conversation.
So that's kind of why I'm asking the questions.
I think that's part of the discussion that we're having, and I think that, I mean, you may, however you choose to vote, may be based on it, but unfortunately, I think maybe all of us would say, hey, if we had 6 months or 3 months to really engage this subject with all the possibilities included, that would be maybe a different analysis, but we don't, because I think we all agree that we have to make this decision like next week.
Yeah, absolutely.
So are you,
Am I
are you-
proposing a different agenda item? No,
Yeah.
I'll let it go.
Okay, so we will have a meeting. I don't know if we have to vote on this.
Nope.
We'll have a meeting next on the 6th. We'll have it at 5:30, maybe 6?
You tell me.
Maybe
I mean,
6, 6 o'clock to
We
make it a
did
little
6
easier.
tonight to make
Yeah.
it more convenient for those who did have to travel, try to give the extra buffer. Our normal time is 5:30. Was that 6 PM buffer helpful, do you feel?
Yes.
Okay.
So we'll have the meeting at 6 o'clock next Wednesday night.
This family, they left us from Fillmore, so that's why they took them while we get here.
So with regard to our June 5th, should we, if it's the intent of the board, then I think it should be public stated tonight that we will not have a summit item on that agenda, correct? Or would you
Correct.
like me to be bringing information on that for then also then the action?
No.
Okay, so we will be having a meeting June 5th, next Tuesday, but there will be no discussion of summit. You still are welcome and invited, as with all meetings. You could even speak to the summit issue during public comment, but we're not going to actually devote time during the meeting to the topic of the summit until our Wednesday meeting.
Because Wednesday will be utterly devoted to Summit. Okay, anyone else, anything? Our meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone.